All right. How's everyone doing today? Today we're probably gonna start off with talking about. Today we're probably gonna talk about Solarpunk today. Pretty good. And how cool of like etiquette is and like how I think we should there. Before we do so, like some personal updates. Self, I sounds like I have to get an MRI at some point, and orders from my doctor as well as a X-ray to see what's going on with my knee. And they also prescribed me to go for physiotherapy as well, so that's fun. God, healthcare is free. Wasn't that would be so much fucking money. Have to wait and see what happens, I guess. A free affiliates, really nice. But yeah, at least I'm finally getting it looked at, and oh, won't really have to. Maybe I won't have to suffer with my knee injury anymore, which is always good news. Anyways, Solarpunk. Solarpunk is an awesome concept to me. It essentially what it is we what Solarpunk is, to my understanding, we're gonna get into it more depth today, but it's essentially like if you are aware what the steampunk aesthetic is, it's essentially Solarpunk is essentially like steampunk except base everything around nature instead of working against nature. We work with it in order to, you know, preserve shit and everything. All of our electronics go to benefit it as well. It's not just us, but nature as well. It's really cool, but in order to do so, we're gonna have to face a lot of things, fascism as well. Anyways, let's hop right into it.
Solarpunk, one of my favorite fusions of arts and politics. Solarpunk is everything from a positive imagining of our collective futures to actually creating it. It derives its name from the cyberpunk genre and all the other punks it has spawned. Real quick, there's steampunk, which focuses on the industrial revolution and steam-powered tech. It's one of the most popular after cyberpunk. There's dieselpunk, focused on the designs of the interwar period. There's atompunk, focused on atomic power. Steelpunk, focused on late 20th century hardware. Stonepunk, which is Neolithic, and there's even nowpunk, which is set today.
I didn't even know that there was many different punk aesthetics. Like I knew about like cyber and steampunk, but I didn't realize that on how many there different aesthetics there were to it. It's kind of crazy.
Solarpunk is a shining vision of a positive future, grounded in our existing world that emphasizes the need for environmental sustainability, self governance, and social justice. It's a movement dedicated to human centric and ecocentric ends. It looks beyond the limitations of capitalism and beyond the current rift between humanity and nature. It's a futurism that focuses on what we should hope for rather than on what we should avoid. Solarpunk recognizes that climate change, the consequences of centuries of damage, aren't averted in the future, yet it still manages to incorporate hope. A future where we've got a lot of work to do, but we're doing better. We're using technology for more uplifting ends, like seed bombing drones and solar ovens. Solarpunk emphasizes real-world application. It's all about what we do here and now, from DIY projects to larger organization. Solarpunk is also very aesthetic, as I'm sure you've realized. It uses a lot of nature motifs.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, the aesthetic of Solarpunk is actually fairly cool. Like, one of the main reasons on why I think, like, living in Solarpunk society is pretty dope. There are also, like, some other things to it as well. Like, a lot of the, like, technology, part of it, as well as, like, a whole bunch of the other stuff. Like, it's really cool, but, like, we're gonna get into that more later. Like who doesn't want to live in this? Like, this looks awesome.
And takes inspiration from Art Nouveau, upcycling, and Asian and African styles and artistic movements. Side note though, let me talk real quick about what isn't Solarpunk. It isn't slapping flowers and trees on concrete buildings or steel skyscrapers with some green on it. That's greenwashing. It has the appearance of sustainability. It's actually really damaging to the environment. A lot of water is used to maintain those quote-unquote green buildings.
Yeah, like the green buildings that they use for washing and like saying that they give a shit about the environment. Like, I'm sorry, but like a garden on top of a roof of like a skyscraper that, you know, been there for like so long doesn't really change anything. So like it's this, but
And they often aren't built with sustainable or durable material. Don't get my guy. In the short time it has been conceived of, Solarpunk has found a place in contemporary media. It's a literary genre after all, but it has been retroactively assigned to other things since the term was really popularized in 2014. Solarpunk, for example, includes films like Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke or literature like Starhawk's The Fifth Sacred Thing. Cyberpunk might be grim and depressing, exploring a world of unchecked corporate power, but Solarpunk rejects it entirely.
yeah, like cyberpunk is really like depressing and shit. Like, if you actually watch like a lot of cyberpunk uh movies or play like a lot of cyberpunk games, it like not only does it like reveal like the worst sides of capitalism, like granted some people will uh, talk to like any leftist, they'll actually say that pretty much living in the in that as in that kind of world now, just without like the very just without the aesthetics and everything. But yeah, no, like cyberpunk is just no, it's just awful. Capitalism. Get the fuck out of here.
It emphasizes collective living and the fulfillment of both nature and humanity in a mutually beneficial relationship. There's a full history of it linked below, but basically around 2008, a blog named Republic of the Bees published the post From Steampunk to Solarpunk, which conceptualized Solarpunk as a literary genre inspired by steampunk. There were a few articles and works here and there, but it gained more steam, or should I say solar, with Miss Olivia Louise's Tumblr post in 2014, establishing some of the aesthetics of Solarpunk. Quote, a world in which children grow up being taught about building electronic tech as well as food gardening and other skills. People have come back to appreciating artisans and craft people, from stonemasons and smithies to dressmakers and jewelers and everyone in between. Her post
I mean, like, we don't really do anything to like acknowledge those contributions ways. But yeah, it's kind of crazy though. Like, better.
post was later referenced by Adam Flynn in his Notes Towards Manifesto in late 2014. He describes the difficulty of being a futurist under 30, watching the world dive down the path of cyberpunk with the ever-present existential threat of climate change. Solarpunk to him is the only alternative to denial or despair. It rejects the individualistic, unsustainable approaches of some futurists who refuse to acknowledge the limits of energy on Earth. Solarpunk is about ingenuity, generativity, independence, and community. It's suffixed by punk because it opposes our existing world. It creates local resilience, authorities be damned, from rooftop solar to guerrilla gardening. Finally, a group called the Solarpunk Community published Un Manifiesto Solarpunk in 2019. It's a short article written in Spanish that basically reiterates some of the previous ideas albeit more succinctly. As for my relationship with Solarpunk, I've been into it for a pretty long time. I can't remember exactly where I first heard about it, but it was probably on Tumblr. It was also on Tumblr where
Uh-oh.
I was introduced to the basics of revolutionary and progressive politics.
Tumblr.
Although Solarpunk never had a particular political ideology assigned to it, it's been embraced by liberatory ideologies of all flavors, from social ecologists to positive anarchists to green socialists. The philosophy of Solarpunk and the politics of anarchism are practically built for each other. Anarchism emphasizes personal freedom and collective liberation from hierarchy.
Tumblr stop the stream before Twitch finds out. Bro, what are you talking about? I don't know what's on Tumblr. Like all the good shit's on Tumblr is gone now, so it's pretty much dead ever since AT&T took over it.
Authoritarianism and exploitation. It seeks, as an ongoing project, common ownership, voluntary cooperation, horizontal organization, and mutual aid. Anarchism has generally been ahead of its time on many political issues, from queer to women's liberation, and its approach to ecology has been no different. Solarpunk.
I mean, they're also doing a lot in Ukraine right now as well. So, I guess anarchists sometimes do something good. Only
can easily be
sometimes.
synthesized with anarchism and many of its various streams, as it explores the possibilities of liberatory technology, localization of production, an end to destructive and wasteful consumption, and a reorientation of our relationship with society, work, nature, and ourselves. It all sounds pretty gooey and feel good, but I want to briefly address those that have lost hope in a better world. We're stuck thinking that this, largely, is the best that we can do. There's this idea in politics these days that imagination has no place in our quote-unquote pragmatic,
I mean, that's generally what tends to happen with the capitalist system, though. It generally tends to squash and squander any form of like new and interesting ideas, or if like a new and good idea actually comes out and into fruition, it generally tends to be like prophesized like fucking crazy, and then like the initial reasoning for like the idea or movement or whatever is, but it's like nothing, and then fucking liberals ruin it.
nonsense world, which is just false. Humans are flexible creatures capable of a whole range of social arrangement. If everyone limited themselves to the confines of what is, we wouldn't be where we are today. It's time to take some steps forward, with a variety of tactics in hand. One of which is art. Art has tremendous influence on us. Music, books, paintings, TV shows, movies, etc. They shape
Video
our ideas of what
games.
humanity is and what humanity can be. While there haven't been many major examples of solarpunk art and entertainment yet, I think we can change that. There are interesting stories to be explored and debates to be had through art. Imagine a novel that explores the different sides and dimensions, the debate on meat consumption in a solarpunk world. Or a comic that follows the community's journey as it seeks to rewild and resuscitate the surrounding ecology. Or, picture this. Maybe alongside a game that imagines a horrifying endgame that maintains capitalism, like Cyberpunk 2077, we imagine an uplifting,
Which honestly is not too bad of a game. Like honestly, like the new Cyberpunk, like it's actually pretty good game. It's actually
yet still challenging
I know
game
people like to shit
that
on it, but it's
exercises our
actually
ability
pretty
to
good.
balance the needs of our local ecosystem and deal with the difficult decisions and conflicts that arise as we reorient our place in the world. Could call it Solarpunk 2033 or something. There's a free idea right there. There's so many ways to incorporate solarpunk in your life and in your movements. It's pretty compatible with prefiguration, which I realize I need to create a video about because people still seem to have some weird assumptions about what I, as an anarchist, want to do. More to the point, solarpunk is truly something you could put into reality.
Well, they patched it a ton. Yeah, like ever since the patches and like it became playable, it's actually pretty good. Like next to No Man's Sky. I mean, No Man's Sky definitely benefited from like a shit ton of patches as well. Let's be real.
And practice and spread. Solarpunks can help create the future they want in various ways, from basic DIY living to maker workshops to creating and expanding eco-living and local autonomy in our towns and cities. Solarpunk is a key piece in a mosaic of possibilities that center human adaptability and the protection of nature, which our present world is organized to destroy, but our future world must prioritize.
Wait. Kirby is over 30 years old? Bro, that's fucking crazy. I didn't think he was gonna be that old. Like, jeez.
Solarpunk is a future with a human face and dirt behind its ears. Peace. Thank you for watching. For my page.
So, yeah, no, like the aesthetic of Solarpunk it goes into actually pretty interesting. So, can't wait to dive more into this topic.
This video was made in collaboration with Androism. Check out his new video after this on even more Solarpunk solutions using the link in the description. The world is falling apart, at least according to the headlines in mainstream media.
A code red for humanity.
Nuclear war.
At our global climate crisis.
Right now, it's hard not to feel like we are on the verge of an apocalypse. But what if we imagined something different? What if we imagined worlds where nature, humanity, and technology not only coexist, but thrive together? Worlds that are rich with the greens and blues of abundance. Utopias? Maybe. But certainly utopias worth striving for. This is what Solarpunk is all about.
I mean, in all honesty, I think that any utopia should be striven for, whether it's solarpunk or steampunk or even like our more modernized interpretations of utopias, whether it be like the Federation in Star Trek or stuff like that, right? So like I think it should be driven for, regardless of whichever aesthetic generally tends to gain weight. Like eventually, like we very well could like achieve this, but like right now, I think anything is better than what we currently have.
Burgeoning genre of art and a movement that casts off the dystopian, technology-heavy futurism of cyberpunk and instead tries to build a world wherein people not only live well, but also live well with nature. Solarpunk is an exercise in imagination, but it is also a call to action. There are very real solarpunk solutions that already exist or are currently feasible that can start to bring about a solarpunk future today. And today we'll look at the viability of some of these solutions and answer the question, how can we build a solarpunk future right now? Before we dive into the promising tools that might aid our quest for a solarpunk world, we first need to understand the role of technology in the solarpunk community. As we will soon see,
So the way that I understand the technology aspect in it is, like, of course you have your technology that inherently goes off of renewables and green energy. So, you know, your solar panels, your wind turbines, your hydroelectric and stuff like that. But it goes beyond that as well, as like, you know, unplugging certain aspects in our life that use up way too much energy. We honestly don't even really need, because like as like Western society uses like a shit ton of energy, and it also goes into like not having to worry about.
technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. Just because your community uses an electric tram or slaps some solar panels on their roofs doesn't mean they're solarpunk. Yes, it's a step in the
And like a lot of it like resorts to like using electric powered stuff instead of like gas powered stuff, which like I honestly think we should be moving away from gas powered stuff anyways, so I don't really see a problem with moving past it. As well as like, you know, having certain things like that will cook your, like, say, like solar uh solar ovens, which I think one of these videos might touch on some stuff like that, like, but they generally tend to be intertwined with eco-fascism and white saviorism. So that's one of the main problems that I think Solarpunk faces.
The right direction, but employing technologies doesn't automatically make you solarpunk. Technologies depend on context. Solar panels under an imperialist fascist state do nothing to change the destructive and exploitative relationship.
Why did he just say America? He should have just said America. Like, we all know what he meant by it.
With the planet and other humans. Plundering the imperial periphery to build electric batteries is not solarpunk. As one Reddit user writes, solarpunk without the abolition of capitalism is just greenwashed cyberpunk.
True.
So solarpunk technologies and solutions should be seen as just one part of a much broader struggle to do away with capitalism and employ more ecological and ethical ways of being. So melding solarpunk with political tendencies like eco-anarchism and eco-socialism is essential to actually realizing those visions in the real world. In addition, solarpunk is neither always low-tech, nor is it always high-tech. The worlds of solarpunk envision technologies applied in appropriate situations in order to foster harmony between people and their environment. The application of these technologies can be diverse. In one town, this could mean passive cooling housing, while in another, it could mean communal living decked out with solar panels. It could mean mechanized apple pickers, or it can mean shovels and hands in the dirt, or...
Like, everyone, like, I'm gonna touch on, like, the communal living. Like, everyone tends to say, oh, fucking public housing is awful. That's not even true, though. Because in, like, Venice, where they actually don't have that shit, a lot of people in Venice actually really enjoy their public housing. Like, it's crazy. Like, one of their right-wing parties actually tried to get rid of their housing, like their public housing, and people in Venice were pissed. It would essentially be like trying to get rid of universal healthcare here. Like, everyone enjoys it, but if someone tries to get rid of it, you're inherently going to make Canadians pissed off. And yeah, it's honestly just ridiculous. There is, like, other aspects to that, but
it can mean...
Because most, like, essentially, especially since, like, when it comes to, like, the healthcare system, a lot of, like, it has, like, a lot of national pride behind it, so, you know, we're so close to the States, and, like, the US doesn't have healthcare, for example, and yeah, something that we actually do better than the Americans on.
Both at the same time. What matters is that those solutions work to strengthen the relationship between communities and the land around them, as well as lessen the work needed to live a comfortable life. So, with that said, what exactly would some of these technologies look like? Drive out into the high desert surrounding Taos, New Mexico, and you'll find beautifully unique houses that look as if they were crafted by the elements. These are Earthships, dwellings that are the brainchild of architect Michael Reynolds, who in the 1970s sought to build a completely off-grid house that could withstand the extreme cold and heat of New Mexico. Earthship design principles focus on core tenets like passive heating and cooling, using recycled and local materials, and fostering self-reliance through integrated greenhouse gardens. And all of these methods are implemented in ways that look right out of a solarpunk drawing. The foundation of an Earthship, for example, is built with recycled tires stacked on top of each other with dirt tightly packed into them. This not only provides structure, but as Earthship dwellers like to say, it acts as a battery. The sheer mass of an Earthship's walls soak in the warmth of sunlight during the day, which the roof is perfectly angled to let in the right amount, and then the wall slowly emits that collected heat out into the room during the cold of the night. As a result,
Like, a lot of this stuff also, like, has to be, like planned out for like, architecture and shit. But, like, they're smart people. I'm sure that they could work, like... I don't know enough about architects, so I don't really know what to do when it comes to that. But, like, yeah, no, like, there's a lot of textual stuff that needs to be done with that for sure.
some Earthship owners claim to not need any external heating sources. The Earthship is built around living with and embracing the natural world. It does so with technologies that are tangible and readily available. It uses other people's trash, like old tires and glass bottles, and the dirt around them to build something that's appealing and comfortable. And it does this in a way that ties people to the land. But to live in an Earthship is not some Eden. There are drawbacks. For one, recycled tires do eventually break down, releasing toxic gases into the air.
Yep.
Reynolds and Earthship builders claim that plastering the walls around the tires protects homeowners from this off-gassing. But other builders claim that you would have to be constantly sealing up cracks to have peace of mind. And claims of independence from the water grid through rainwater collection are dubious in desert climates like Taos. And if you're hoping to heat your house through sunlight in an Earthship in a cloudy area, think again. While Earthships certainly aren't perfect, they offer up promising ideas of how to integrate nature into everyday living. They are a Solarpunk answer to the question, how can we live comfortably with the natural world? They won't work everywhere, but individual pieces of them can be integrated into housing anywhere. Imagine...
Like, I honestly think, a vast majority of areas could easily adopt that and everything, but like there are some instances where that's not always going to be the case and everything, and like a lot of, and it's going to be hard for a lot of people to actually get on board with going with this, because we take a lot of things that we have for granted, and we're used to things being a certain way, but like we're adaptable creatures though, so we eventually learn to deal with
in homes using passive heating and cooling systems so they don't have to run the air conditioning or heating all the time. Imagine building gardens within a house. Imagine incorporating filtered rainwater into our plumbing, and imagine building a house with as many local...
Okay, the filtered rainwater in plumbing actually sounds pretty nice. Like that's honestly pretty cool.
And recycled materials as possible. The Earthship shows us that there are already ways to live well and lightly on the land right now. And it does so in a way that melds low-tech and high-tech ideas into a beautiful structure. This is Solarpunk, finding the appropriate technologies to build aesthetically stimulating and livable dwellings that tie us tightly with the landscape. Along the Hudson River in New York, Sam Merritt runs a zero-carbon shipping company. No, he doesn't run a fleet of electric trucks, nor does he...
Yeah, usually what zero-punk means, or zero-carbon means, it's a greenwashed piece of propaganda. Essentially what it is whenever, like, it's the same thing with net zero. Like, they generally tend to be like, oh, we're running zero emissions because, we use electric vehicles, or what the coal industry and big oil like to do is they like to say that they're offsetting the amount of fossil fuels that they burn by by like planting a tree and like just one tree. Like that's not how that works. Like if we have more time today, we can probably go into it, but we'll see.
Bike. Merit ships local goods up and down the Hudson River by sailboat. That's right, in the age of massive gas-powered cargo ships making globe-spanning trips, Merit has created a fossil fuel-free cargo company based on sailing. One that is at the whims of the weather and the seasons, but makes the buyer appreciate the ebbs and flows of the natural world around them. This epitomizes a Solarpunk future. Solarpunk envisions a world in which the technologies we use help us to appreciate and tune into the rhythms of the planet. And sailing in the 21st century has the potential of making that happen. Merit shows us,
And like I am sure that there are like I'm sure that there's been like a lot of advancements in boats and stuff like that in order to help with that don't require using a shit ton of fossil fuels.
that it's already feasible to do on a small scale. And when considering that sails and ropes for ships could support a thriving hemp farming operation that sequesters thousands of tons of carbon with each crop, sailing cargo locally is an appealing possibility. But sailing in the 21st century runs the gamut of low-tech rigs like Merit's schooner to futuristic technologies that are beginning to see their first real-world tests. Right now, engineers and cargo companies are in the midst of wrestling with the polluting reality of international cargo and are on the hunt for high-tech solutions for big shipping. While Solarpunk emphasizes the local, it can still embrace global travel.
This animation background is, if you haven't watched it, you should watch it.
And transport with emerging technologies,
What
like
Solarpunk can look
retrofitting
like.
cargo ships with column-like sails that reduce fuel use by possibly as much as 30%, or future-thinking cargo ships with retracting rigid sails. A Solarpunk future that involves international cargo recognizes the need for these high-tech sailing solutions because they are appropriate for their high seas context. But what's important is that these high-tech cargo ships are not viewed as a silver bullet. In a regional or local setting, hemp sails and schooners are a much more suitable and nature-reliant solution. So while a Solarpunk future might envision rigid sail cargo ships traversing the open ocean to facilitate a thriving hemp trade between continents, a smaller canvas sailboat might bring those goods the last mile to markets. But at this point, you might be thinking, wait, wouldn't sailing mean that there'll be delays? Won't everything take a long time to get to me?
No.
To that, I would say that Solarpunk does not prioritize Amazon Prime-like convenience. That kind.
And like I honestly don't think that it would necessarily mean that there'd be like delays, and even if there was delays, it'd be like very, very minimal. But like a lot of like Solarpunk like aesthetics and everything, they don't, and like what they actually root for and everything, they don't generally tend to advocate for like convenience and shit. Like a lot of it is also like in touch with anarchism or like communism, some other stuff like that. It's mostly surrounded by like it's I words I can use words today. It's more or less focused around, you know, like liberation for them. So like liberation for the planet, liberation for the people. Like it's great.
Kind of convenience is something people in the Imperial core will have to learn to do without. It comes at the cost of the planet and the people forced to work grueling conditions and hours to get that package to your front door.
Yeah, and like historically, Amazon workers have had to piss in bottles and shit in bags. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, like that, like I don't care if my package takes like a little bit longer to get in. I honestly don't care. I know that there will actually be people who will care a lot. I do think that most generally won't tend to care. But like, I'm sorry, but I don't need to have something in on the exact same day where I order it. I don't care. Because often, like we've been over this before on stream, I believe, where we talked about Amazon's toll on the even like on the environment. Who knew treating people like people is a good idea? I mean, yeah, that's usually it's usually a good idea. Yeah, Amazon historically has been fucking awful for treating its workers like shit. Because I don't I don't think I've watched it on stream, but there was a there was this Amazon worker who like was getting really bad pains, and like Amazon doesn't have like any benefits or anything. And I think she was in America as well, so it's even worse for her. Like she was getting like really bad, like I think it was back pains due to having to like constantly climb up and down the ladders to retrieve stuff and like put it in like a box or whatever. Like it's just sad once you hear about stories like that. But at least they're being unionized though, so that's always good.
Door in
Now
one
they can actually
day.
use the bathroom.
Solarpunk envisions a world wherein we don't have to crush people and the planet in order to find comfort in our lives. So yes, things might be a bit slower, but I would gladly slow down my life if it meant that my community and my surroundings thrived.
Yeah, that's like one thing with like the capitalist dogma though, is that like everything has to be now, and like you're not allowed to enjoy like any of the leisures of life. You're always expected to put out the fucking grind set and like work like a shit ton of hours and everything. Like it's ridiculous.
Although
for the sake of
Earthships and
convenience.
sailing cargo do exist in this world, they aren't prevalent. Looking around, I usually see the plumes of smoke rising from cargo ships, not the undulating waves of a sail. And I see concrete buildings instead of earth-packed dwellings. So, what's holding us back? There is no simple answer. There are a huge host of reasons, but when it comes to these beautiful solarpunk worlds that artists around the world have begun to render, I can't help but think about, you guessed it, capitalism. The profit-centered global economy we've built has driven us to create technologies that, for the most part, function to expand margins and make more money for the capitalist class. Ideas
like almost none of it is for like the average everyday Joe who, you know, wants to follow his passions and shit. Like, it's all about increasing that tiny little profit margin that they can, which is why they will often like try and squeeze as much labor out of the proletariat class as they're able to do. It's crazy.
and inventions that can't compete in the market, regardless of whether they are zero carbon or build community health, are pushed to the margins. Merit's sailboat cargo company is a novelty because it can't compete with the monopoly of Amazon Prime or industrial shipping companies like Maersk. Solarpunk dares us to dream of a world outside of capitalism because even though these technologies do exist right now under capitalism, they are not widespread or quote-unquote successful. The labor required to ram hundreds of tires full of dirt for an Earthship, for example, would bleed someone's bank account dry, while the wind-reliant nature of a sailboat means that it can't provide the regimented convenience of one-day shipping. Combining low and high-tech solutions, Solarpunk demands a future built not on profit, but instead on community and a strong relationship with the natural world. So instead of focusing
kind of sounds like something that we've talked about on stream multiple times. That be again? What is that? What is it? I don't remember.
on technologies that make the most profit, Solarpunk urges us to seek out ideas and tools that deepen our interpersonal relationships as well as our ties to the earth beneath our feet. If you want to learn about even more tools that we can use right now to forge a Solarpunk world, head over to Androism's YouTube channel and check out his.
So yeah, like Solarpunk, like it's such a cool aesthetic. Like I would be all for it. It's awesome.
When we look out into the murky depths of our future, it's hard not to despair. The scars of capitalism run ragged through our minds, bodies, and environments. The uncertainty of a world in climate chaos is driving many into a state of apathy. Inaction and status quo politicking is so prevalent among the ruling class that it's easy to believe in neoliberal hawk Margaret Thatcher's assertion that there is no alternative. Well, there actually is. It's beautiful, vibrant, and gives me hope for a juster, more ethical, and more ecological future. It's called Solarpunk. Today, we're going to dive into the visions of Solarpunk, uncovering what it is, what it looks like, and how exactly it can be implemented right now to construct a radical eco and human-centric present. This video is made in collaboration with St. Andrewism. Make sure to check out his video on even more Solarpunk solutions after this. Solarpunk, a burgeoning movement blending aesthetics and politics that envisions a future which answers the question, what kind of world will emerge when we finally transition to renewables? In opposition to the environments of cyberpunk or dieselpunk, which craft dystopian futures based in capitalist corruption, technological authoritarianism, and the deification of fossil fuels,
I mean, we essentially do live in like some form of that world. So, like, again, I think we're just mostly missing like the aesthetics part. Like, granted, I know things could be a lot worse, but like, it still essentially is true. So,
Solarpunk grounds the future in the task of bridging the chasm between human society and the natural world. A chasm that is currently widening at the hands of exploitative capitalism. So Solarpunk runs starkly in opposition to the political and economic forces of late-stage capitalism by demanding a non-hierarchical, diverse, decentralized, yet integrated world. A world with worker cooperatives, tool shares, makers spaces, and common pool resources. And all of these decentralized
nice.
approaches to economies would emphasize production focused not only on ecological well-being, but human well-being. Solarpunk also means embracing technologies like rooftop solar, passive houses, or even modern sailing innovations to allow the natural workings of the planet to flourish while also providing a comfortable living to the masses. In short, Solarpunk argues that just climate action doesn't have
like, could you imagine living in a world that looks like this? Like, that would be awesome. I don't know about you, but that would 100% be awesome to live in.
to the masses. In short, Solarpunk argues that just climate action doesn't have to mean living.
Yeah, right? Like, we should 100% be moving towards, like, more, like, focused on that, like, on people and nature, instead of, like, squeezing every little bit of, money that they're able to get out of them. It's crazy. I would love to live somewhere that looks like that.
In scarcity or giving things up. It instead shows us how beautiful the world could be when we live with appropriate abundance. As a result, leftist tendencies like eco-anarchism, post-civ, and indigenous sovereignty synthesize well and indeed must be integrated with the visions of Solarpunk.
Yeah, like I have talked with indigenous people before about like Solarpunk aesthetics and everything. And they're like fully on board with it. They're like, yes, we should do this now. Because I mean, like, we've lived with the land for like such a long time. Definitely help with the mental health of the public. Absolutely. Like having like it has been proven that, you know, having more like interactions with nature and everything. Like even if it's just like, like a really nice park or something like that, like it helps bring people up. Well, and actually giving people time to leisure as well, that doesn't help, or that helps too. So like a lot of indigenous people are on board with Solarpunk. I mean, they lived in cooperation with the land for such a long time before the colonizers had come over and essentially ruined everything. Even though, they showed them how to farm and everything, like farm on the land and, thing like that, and like how to properly take care of, like they shared a lot of their knowledge with them. It's kind of crazy. Fuck. Yeah, no, taking a break from tech is definitely nice. Like, especially from social media. Like, social media is just crazy. It does not help. Even, like, it doesn't help anyone from, like, younger people or older people. Because, like, there's so much that happens and everything. It's just, like, it's crazy.
But as much as Solarpunk is a political and economic imaginary, it is also an artistic and aesthetic one too. This is in part why Solarpunk is so captivating. While things like political theory, tackling the minutiae of participatory democracy, and long-term worker-owned sustainable production is crucial, building culture, beauty, and joy of—
Like, I do think another part in order to achieve this is involved with, having a lot of like repetitive and dangerous jobs be done by automation. Because like, sure, we could easily achieve this aesthetic, but if it's still like hyper capitalistic, like it won't even matter, right? So
around those politics is just as important. The artistic visions of Solarpunk draw us in and present irresistible visions of what an ecocentric and human-centric world could be. And if you're curious exactly what the Solarpunk aesthetic looks like, here are just a
Wakanda.
few examples.
Like, Wakanda could easily be considered like Solarpunk. Like, it's crazy. Like, I mean, who the hell wouldn't want to live in Wakanda? Like, that's great.
Solarpunk presents a radical hope to an otherwise despair-filled movement.
Wakanda forever.
But to be clear, this isn't the blind capitalist hope that believes the world will magically turn out better with business as usual practices. It's a hope that encourages resistance and transformation, the dismantling of capitalism to build a new economy and culture in its stead, a hope that we have to work towards. So while Solarpunk envisions possible futures, it is still very much grounded in the present. There are very tangible actions and technologies that we can implement right now to build a Solarpunk future. The following are just a few.
Yeah, so I think this is the video that I was referring to. Like, solar ovens and a lot of general, like, inventions that have to do with, like, nature and using, like, nature to our advantage to stuff like, say, cook food generally tends to have, like, a lot of, like, eco-fascist, rhetoric tied around it, as well as, white saviorism as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the video. So, and I think he's gonna, like, go over it as well, so.
If we are to truly rid ourselves of fossil fuels, the gas-hungry oven must be a relic of the past.
It should be.
Solarpunk envisions a number of do-it-yourself alternatives that are already available now that can not only replace our grid-reliant gas-heavy ranges, but also might transform the way we cook our food. One of those technologies is the solar oven, a low-tech, easy to—
And for the record, like, some places in Africa actually do use this because you had like a bunch of like wealthy white people come over saying that, you know, they're the people in Africa's consumption of fossil fuels is like off the charts, and well, they have to use stuff like this in order to do so. Which, like, I'm all for like supporting like technologies like this, but like, come on, my guy, like North America, like any developed nation uses a fuck ton of oil. It's ridiculous. Like, we produce so much like CO2 and greenhouse emissions, like it's not even.
To assemble and transport piece of cookware that uses an array of large mirrors to heat a central cooking surface. In a very solarpunk way, it harnesses the sun directly to create your hot meal. In some cases, it can cook meals in a matter of minutes, but if it's a cloudier day, it may take as long as 2 hours. And of course, when the sun isn't shining, solar ovens don't work, which is why it needs to be supplemented with tools like biogas digesters, which convert your cooking food scraps into usable gas, or even electric stoves that run on your rooftop solar or community-owned wind farm electricity. In addition,
You know, like a lot of people want to use solar panels on top of their housing to be like more like energy independent and everything. And I honestly don't understand why people can't do that. Like they honestly should 100% be able to. Some people believe that solar ovens put radiation your food poisoning you. I mean, like you could literally say the exact same thing about like gas ovens though as well, because like historically, like fossil fuels have been notorious for poisoning people. So like that argument that some people make is just ridiculous to me. Because by that logic, then everyone who goes outside should be getting radiation poisoning. But that doesn't end up happening. I honestly don't know why they say that, to be honest.
Solarpunk stands firmly against the solar oven as a tool of white saviorism, like it's often been used in the past. The solar oven has a history of being wielded by—
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you generally have like a bunch of like rich old white dudes going over to like Africa and being like, no, you have to use these solar ovens and everything, and then you know you can have nice hot meals and everything and not have to worry about it. But like it's honestly kind of disgusting, to be honest.
by white entrepreneurs or philanthropists like Crosby Menzies, who saw people in Zambia using wood fires to cook their food and decided that solar cookers would be the answer to what is actually a much larger structural problem. In opposition to colonial paternalism, Solarpunk sees the solar oven as a liberatory tool that is off-grid, decentralized, and thrives in certain contexts. But it also recognizes that it's not a silver bullet solution to cooking sustainably. But when combined with acts like Puma Blitzing, which is a quick but lasting intervention on the landscape—
Wait, what? I'll have to watch that after because I have no idea what that is.
combining the principles of permaculture and the power of collective work to transform unused or misused spaces into flourishing gardens and recreational spaces in a short period of time, the solar oven can function as the last stone in the food's path, from a seed in the soil to a cooked meal in your mouth. In this way, the solar oven is one tool of many in a vast array of alternative
Like, how could you look at this and be like, yo, this would be awesome to live in? Like, how could anyone say that this would be awesome to live in? Phenomenal.
centralized, nature-centric technologies that are incorporated into a larger solarpunk cultural system of meeting needs by harnessing the sun.
I know, we're gonna watch the video after. I'm not entirely sure on what it is, so we'll get into it after this.
Rebuilding flourishing communities is core to the philosophy of Solarpunk.
That's Andrew, who also just released a video about even more Solarpunk solutions over on his YouTube channel, St. Andrewism.
We cannot rely solely on ourselves as individuals to make it through climate collapse. Nor can we rely on governments or corporations to help us survive, let alone thrive, in the midst of...
I mean, in context of like neoliberal governments, yes, I think that in the context of like a socialist or even a communist government, it could easily happen. But as things stand right now, I don't think.
compounding crises. Humans are a social species, and the recognition of such is an essential aspect of Solarpunk. In a world where neighborhoods are more atomized than ever, and common spaces can hardly be found, developing maker spaces can help us develop and strengthen our community ties. Empty classrooms in schools, underutilized rooms in existing libraries, or even unused spaces in people's homes can easily be transformed into places where people with common or divergent interests, whether woodworking, coding, 3D printing, machining, arts, crafting, sewing, science, cooking, or biking even, can meet, socialize, and collaborate. In my opinion, communities should come together to fundraise to build their own spaces, held in common, rather than relying on outside infrastructure. Maker spaces can easily blossom as people come together to share knowledge, share resources, and just have fun. Although the makerspace scene is currently dominated by middle-class white men, creating spaces where disadvantaged groups and communities can develop their skills and thrive is an important step towards greater social justice, a key element in a Solarpunk world. As for how makerspaces can be run, many models exist, but I'm partial to the anarchist model, where these spaces are collectively owned and run by those who are involved in them. Maker spaces are just one of the many ways we can unite communities through Solarpunk principles.
While a Solarpunk world will look local, that doesn't mean that communities aren't interconnected or that global travel will cease to exist. In fact, travel in a Solarpunk world is as exciting and alluring as ever.
Yeah, no, I think if I remember correctly, I think the main thing he's gonna go over for Solarpunk, especially like travel for long distances, is blimps. And like, I'm sure that there's been a shit ton of like, developments in the in blimp technology in the last 100 years. Because like they're way much more like they're way much more efficient, like energy efficient than planes are. Plus, they're able to get to places and land places where planes can't. So, like in the middle of a field, for an example.
Without the copious amounts of fossil fuels to boot. Imagine a world where traveling
Oh, that Trusty
doesn't have to be
Oh,
rushed
man.
or stressful. And
Why can't we have nice things like this? Need this right now.
in fact, the transportation method could be the destination. Airships, with their low or zero emission potential, could very easily be implemented into a Solarpunk world. To be clear though, these are not the 18th century Zeppelins of steampunk. Instead, these are 21st century blimps and
Like, how could you look at this and not be like, at this point, I think we should go for it. Like, when you see shit like this is awesome. I would love to travel in something like this.
passenger airships that are already being flight tested across the world. There are a number of benefits to airships. For one, they don't require any new infrastructure because they can take off and land pretty much anywhere, which also means that these ships can easily travel to hard-to-reach places or touch down in a place that's far from a city's center. Also, current airships require 90% less fuel when compared to commercial jets.
It looks like fiction, but it is getting closer to reality. I mean, yeah, like, that's one thing a lot of people don't understand is that, like, a lot of the things that we, like, fantasize, like, even in, like, the 90s and whatever, is, like, coming more and more close to reality than we think it is, like holograms or shit like that. Like, remember when like people in the 90s were like super like hyped over like face calling or like video calling, and then that came to be a thing, and now it's just more or less of like, hey, this is new, or I guess this exists now. Like, there's so much cool shit that we can achieve, but like I honestly think that the capitalist dogma is standing in the way, like as well as like a lot of fascist rhetoric as well, in order to have nice stuff like that. Like, it's crazy.
Future designs possibly requiring no fuel and going fully electric. And in a solarpunk world, these aircraft aren't built by big multinationals like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, or piloted by Delta. They're constructed by worker-owned co-ops and collectively shared by a network of communities. So not only will they be low emissions, but they will also be free, because it shouldn't cost anything to visit your family if they live halfway across the continent, or even just visit a place you've never.
I mean, like, I honestly think that like travel should be free regardless. Like, especially like nationwide. Like, if it's and public. If it's nationwide and public, it should 100% be free. Like, if it's gonna be using, like, let's use trains as an example. Like, God, I love the Trussi. I don't know why, I just love talking about the Trussi. But like trains, like if we have like the nice high speed rails like that either China or Japan has, or even like not as significant like and nice like the European style trains, like I'd be okay with that too. But like if we are going to be doing that, it should 100% be free, because it's being built on our land and it's being used with our resources. So it should 100% be free. Like, generally public transit tends to be free anyways, unless it's like owned by like a giant corporation that has a deal with the city for like, I don't know, like a $2 fare or whatever. But like I honestly think it should be free regardless. It's so nice. Like, we need this, man. Oh, choo choo.
Never seen before. But airships are just one piece of the transportation mix in a solarpunk world. 21st century cargo ships fit with sails and solar panels, free and electric public tram systems for local transportation, all fit within the decentralized, nature and human-centric futurism that is solarpunk. But in order to realize this future, we need to start building it now.
And we should 100% be building it now. Like, that, it's just awesome. Like, we should just be doing it, right? Oh no. Oh no. I was scrolling through Twitter and I see this. What the hell are you doing, my guy?
The appeal of solarpunk is that not only is it lush, beautiful, and caring, but that the tools we need to build this world are available right now. Solarpunk gives us a reason and a blueprint for what comes next. Dismantling the structures of capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism is certainly a difficult and grueling endeavor. But if we have a shining light at the end of the tunnel, the battle for a more sustainable and ethical world might just be a little easier. If you're looking for even more solarpunk and leftist content, definitely make sure to check out the
Yeah, like, I don't know. Solarpunk is great. Have it, man. Indigenous community world by it, like, so great. Anyways, Puma Blitzing. I'm not too sure what that is, so I'll go over it now.
We are in the process of climate collapse. Forests are being leveled, fires are raging, floods destroying homes, species are dying out, hurricanes are getting worse, and profits continue to line the pockets of those above us. We already know who's responsible. We understand that the capitalist system incentivizes the destruction of our future. This video merely seeks to provide just one answer to the question of what we can do about our crisis of crises. It's a massive undertaking, but we must work together to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities. We cannot rely on our governments to take care of us, and we cannot rely on corporations to change their ways.
Governments can't rely on governments. I mean, modern neoliberal governments can't trust.
We must unite and build a better society in the shell of the old. The tactic I'm about to outline is just one part of our strategy to prepare our communities for the next chapter of humanity. Let's talk Puma Blitzing. Puma Blitz is a contraction of permaculture and blitz. Permaculture is a design system based on sustainable living, and blitz is the German word for lightning strike, which is basically what Puma Blitzing is like. A Puma Blitz is a quick, focused, and organized application of energy by a community to transform a space within a day to implement a permaculture system. As far as I can tell, the Puma Blitzing movement got its start in Australia, though it has expanded to New Zealand, Canada, Uganda, Hong Kong, Turkey, Italy.
Wait, what? It's been in Canada for how long? And like, it's the first time I'm actually hearing about it. So, I'm actually kind of surprised about it.
Portugal, Morocco, and Hawaii. Through permaculture and, by extension, Puma Blitzing, you can learn about horticulture, animal
I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense due to the indigenous communities. Like, I guess that kind of makes sense. I imagine it's probably like very big in there, but I don't know what it is, so well, probably like
husbandry, land surveillance, systems thinking, beekeeping, composting, recycling, carpentry, plumbing, heavy machinery operation, mechanics, forestry, food preservation, cooking, invasive species management, plant breeding, facilitating genetic diversity, mitigating and adapting to climate disruptions, managing waste and water, and developing alternative energy. And that's not all. You can also learn about biology, the study of living organisms, ecology, the study of relationships between environments and organisms, geology, the study of the Earth's processes, geography, the study of human interaction with the Earth's properties, pedology, the study of soil, hydrology, the study of water systems, mycology, the study of fungi, herbalism, the study of plant medicine, vermiculture, the cultivation of
mushrooms are fun, guys. I'm sorry.
earthworms, aquaculture, the cultivation of fresh and saltwater species.
Yeah, no, the basics of what permablitzing is. Yeah, no, like a lot of indigenous communities are on board, so it's great. They want all that stuff. So I'm honestly not surprised that that Canada's part of it. It's probably mostly a vast majority of that number probably comes from the indigenous communities, as well as like the Canadian far left as well.
Hydroponics, the cultivation of plants without soil, and aquaponics, the cultivation of hydroponic plants within an aquaculture system. You can gain a lot of knowledge by studying the indigenous practices of your region too.
Yep.
And that's not even mentioning the experience you'll gain in organizing, movement building, facilitating groups, consulting, drafting, teaching, managing conflict, developing alternative economics, advocating social justice, and handling legal issues. Puma Blitzes are a great space to radicalize and be radicalized, to educate and be educated. You can learn about permaculture and gardening, build community networks, meet passionate people, share some good food, exercise, and have lots of fun. Permablitzes are usually planned or assisted by someone with a certificate in permaculture design, which you can get online. In fact, this playlist by Oregon State University has all the information you need to get started. Link is in the description. Permablitzers usually establish edible, sustainable garden havens in backyards, but permablitzing can also be used to build free, open gardens for the whole community. Look out for any empty lots in your neighborhood and make them beneficial for all.
Like, could you imagine if, like, they're like in a giant city where there was nowhere, like nothing being used or like for anything. It's just like an open lot or whatever. Like no one's living there. Having that as like a community garden or something like that'd be crazy.
Permablitz networks run on mutual aid. When you contribute to the backyards of others, others will contribute to your backyard too. Supplies come from the network as well. Every member can volunteer a little something, whether it be seeds, soil, wood, compost, newspapers, saplings, chickens, or expertise. Everyone is welcome, no matter their level of knowledge or physical ability. And if you've never done any gardening or organizing before, a permablitz is a great place to begin. But how do you start permablitzing? Well, first you have to be connected with people. If there isn't a permablitzing group in your community, then start one. Or move into an existing leftist or environmentalist group and work with them to establish the full autonomy of the community. You can work with any size, but the more the merrier. Try to get as many people involved as possible. Pick a starting location, whether it be a backyard or an empty lot, and set a day for the permablitz. Get everyone's consensus, delegate who's bringing what and who's doing what, and get up bright and early on the day to get started. There's all sorts of jobs to be done, from moving soil, manure and compost, to mulching, to planting trees and saplings, installing rain collectors, pruning and weeding, construction work like raised beds, compost bins, chicken coop or bug hotels, and digging irrigation systems. Throughout the day, skill shares and mini workshops can take place, both formal and informal.
Like some of these things actually do happen. Like permablitzing does happen in like some areas. I know it's like very predominant in more indigenous communities, but there are some other communities that do it as well. Yeah, no, this is great. Like 100% more permablitzed areas.
Formal. Skillshares can teach things like how to plant seeds, prune fruit trees, set up compost systems, use tools, create planters or raised beds, etc. And many workshops can explain the elements of permaculture design, like the benefits of raised beds, no-dig garden systems, types of edible plants, how composting works, and lots of other stuff. And of course, the host or a group of volunteers should pitch in to provide lunch for everyone. Remember, the goal is to complete a fully sustainable permaculture garden by the end of the day, but don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Be realistic with your goals considering the amount of volunteers you've got to work with. Hopefully by evening, everyone can take a step back and admire the transformation. Permablitz complete. For more information, check out permablitz.net, as well as the playlist I mentioned earlier. Best of luck. Permablitzing.
I mean, we might take a look at that some other day, but yeah, no, it's definitely something that's nice. And there should be more of. Anyways, let's go on to how we can make all this a reality.
Man, it is hot today. Whoa, it's hot out here, man. It is hot today.
In light of the recent IPCC report issuing a code red warning for humanity.
When was this? This must be a little bit ago. Or last year.
Climate hopelessness is at an all-time high. As I've spoken about many times before in my videos addressing the climate movement, Gen Z, and the psychology of collapse, there's no mincing words and no sense in beating around the bush. We are in hell, and in many ways, things are gonna get worse. And yet, I must passionately so
Yeah, when it comes to climate, things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. That's unfortunately the reality that we have to deal with because of how much carbon emissions we have released into the air. It's kind of sad, honestly.
Solarpunk as ever. Recently, I released a music video based on Solarpunk to lend some encouragement to all those involved in the movement. But for those who haven't seen it, and haven't seen my video on Solarpunk either, to summarize, Solarpunk is a shining vision of a positive, communal future grounded in our efforts in the existing world that emphasizes the need for environmental sustainability, self-governance, and social justice. It's an aesthetic and hypothetical, sure, but it's also embedded in a much realer, broader movement dedicated to going beyond the limitations of capitalism and beyond the current rift between humanity and nature. Some people question why Solarpunk is even called punk. Isn't it just some 100% in the vibrant slider hopium utopia? Well, I think this misses the point of Solarpunk and its role in the present world we live in. There is emphasis on the future among Solarpunk spaces, but the punk aspect of Solarpunk is derived from its rebellion against
Uh-oh. That's not good. Son just got COVID. That's not good. That's kind of crazy. I'm honestly kind of surprised he avoided it for this long.
the war on hope today. In this world, imagining and fighting for a solarpunk future goes contrary to everything those in power want for us. It's an uphill battle, one that leans on hope in humanity, to plant the seeds of reimagination in the minds of many. I've spoken against blind hope in the past, but the hope I speak of here should, in my view, be closer to balanced realism. One that discards the blinders of pessimism and optimism so you can adapt to any number of possible outcomes, not only the ideal. I think Solarpunk has, in recent years, been adjusting to the reality that climate catastrophe is not something we can just avert. So the practice of Solarpunks has been, in a sense, building for the best while preparing for the worst. I think the best way to convince you, hypothetical internet stranger, of the merits of Solarpunk would be to show you what Solarpunk can and does look like in real life, through the positive synergy of present and future technology, nature, and community. In combination with the traditions of those long immersed in the eco struggle, we can generate a range of Solarpunk solutions. Let's start with the do-it-yourself solutions, which
I mean, the more and more I hear about Solarpunk, the more and more I want it, like, to be honest. It's great. Like, who doesn't want it?
really bring out the punk in Solarpunk. DIY was a massive part of the original punk movement, part of rejecting the levels of consumerism that corporations expected of you. But beyond that, DIY is an ethos, and that ethos of resilient, autonomous, anti-authoritarian and collaborative action can be seen in Solarpunk through the practice of guerrilla gardening. Guerrilla gardening is the practice of planting public spaces without permission. It's the art of transforming unused land into flourishing gardens.
I mean, if I actually saw someone doing guerrilla gardening, like, really anywhere, I wouldn't really care, because, like, it's not being used for anything, right? So, like, honestly, who cares? Like, if they're planting, if they're, using that space to plant plants, I say let them. There's no real reason that they shouldn't be.
The term was first coined in New York City in 1973. A group of neighbors in Lower East Side Manhattan, who grew tired of the ugly, abandoned lots that defined the city's landscape during its fiscal crisis, called themselves the Green Guerrillas, as they illegally transformed abandoned lots into havens of flora. Their successors around the world cultivated beauty and community in the rubble of capitalism.
I think that last photo was from somewhere in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it looks like a European thing.
Between the medians of busy streets. The guerrilla gardener's favorite weapon of choice was and is the seed bomb. Packets of compost, clay, seeds, and water. Guerrilla gardening practices attempt to restore nature in concrete hell, resist the neglect that marks many city districts, and build a sense of community.
It it's kind of funny though, because like outside of like a couple instances and locations in the UK or England, there's like a couple. There are like a couple. Like for the most part, they're usually pretty good about it. Outside of, like train stops and in like their major like touristy places. But when you move to North America, like everything is designed around like the car, and like the dominant species is the car. So everything's like revolved around the car, and like it's just all ugly gray. And it's like it's ridiculous. Like there's just so much concrete everywhere.
Pride and connection among neighbors. Part of the guerrilla gardening movement has been motivated by protest against the capitalist notions of private property and statist notions of urban management. Some guerrilla gardeners simply aim to beautify and reintroduce endangered native plants, while others focus more on growing produce to combat rising food prices and provide nourishment to those in need, and especially those living in food deserts. Regardless, such efforts facilitate habitat and food for insects and pollinators, and bring strangers together for a common cause. Even those who have yet to be radicalized can get in on the fun, so it's a great way to introduce subversive ideas to otherwise hesitant people.
I do also think that this is a very good way to get people into more like left-wing politics and ideas, because you know they're inherently supporting their society and everything, and like they're having a sense of the community as well. So, and like left-wing politics generally tends to be focused on the community and the people. So I think stuff like this is it's actually good.
The best part is, it's so easy to get started. You can begin by scoping out some potential targets. Perhaps some already come to mind. Vacant corners, concrete pockets filled with litter, or empty sidewalk sidings. It's best, of course, to keep it close to your usual commute so you can easily access, monitor, and tend your target location. In some cases, you can just pelt a seed bomb and forget all about it, but in other cases, the orphaned land might need some TLC. Weeding, watering, and maybe a booster compost can help it out immensely. When you're guerrilla gardening, look for saplings and seeds of indigenous, non-invasive, and preferably low-maintenance plants from nurseries, wholesalers, or established gardeners.
And like honestly, we should be getting rid of the lawn too, because like all that the lawn does is just kill biodiversity in favor of what most people consider a weed when they're gardening. Oh. But like it honestly should be like completely gone. Like yeah, it's just because you know if you let your lawn grow, apparently that's a crime and you can get like fined for it as well, which is
The plants you choose are up to you and your circumstances, but it doesn't hurt to introduce some pops of color to the streets. For some guerrilla gardeners, their efforts are best exercised in the cover of darkness in order to protect them from state harassment. However, daylight work can sometimes carry on undisturbed too. Regardless, look for a low traffic time of day to work on it. The less attention, the better. Create a plan and get together with your guerrilla forces, whether friends, neighbors, or sympathetic strangers, to move in with swiftness and coordination. For lone wolves or small groups, the seed bomb is the quickest option. These earth dumplings, popularized by Japanese natural farming pioneer Masanobu Fukuoka, introduce mixed varieties of plants to the earth in one convenient, easy to produce and store location. There are many different guides available online, but here's just one recipe.
wait, it's that easy? It's that easy to do it? it's that easy to, like do to do that, or, or yeah, if it's that easy to like have a nice greener society and like have non-invasive species take over, like that seems like such an easy way that I think people could solve the problem. Like honestly, that doesn't even look hard to do either. Like it's just like dirt, clay, compost, seeds, and like some chili powder. Like everyone can do that. I at least I think so. All that stuff, generally speaking, does tend to be relatively cheap.
As for some final tips, cultivate when you can, throw your seed bombs in the right season of the year, aim for quality over quantity, wear sturdy but comfortable shoes, source plants and materials as cheaply as possible. Remember to walk with bags so you can easily collect any garbage, rocks, and weeds that you're clearing away. Give your plants a little water from time to time, and give your plants a boost with compost when you can. Remember, there are other methods of seed distribution you can try out beyond what I've presented, so be creative. For example, at SF in Bloom on TikTok skateboards around San Francisco with a pepper shaker bottle and spreads native seeds that way.
I mean, that's just clever. Like honestly, that's just clever. Like that's that's a great way to do it.
Lastly, check out at Octavia Chill on TikTok. She's an anarchist guerrilla gardener with some great resources if you'd like to learn more about how you and or your affinity group can get started. Let's turn now to community level solutions, because Solarpunk's got you covered there too. Part of our aim is for the radical development of communal food autonomy through food forest commons. A food forest, or forest garden, is a diverse planting of edible plants that attempts to mimic the ecosystems and patterns found in nature. They aim to be three-dimensional, with life extending up, down, and out in all directions. Food forests are rooted in permaculture principles. Our Changing Climate already has an excellent video on permaculture that you can check out, and you should probably watch my video on Puma Blitzing too. But put simply, permaculture is a design philosophy that integrates land, resources, people, and the environment through mutually beneficial synergies, imitating the diverse, harmonious, stable, resilient, no waste, and closed loop systems seen in nature. Permaculture seeks to work with, rather than against, nature. Food forests, by the way, are nothing new. In the tropics, from India to Indonesia to the Americas to Africa, such practices were the standard and have been at work for thousands of years.
Yeah, no, like for like I keep going back to it, but like before like colonization happened in North America, like there actually were like food forests and everything. Like if you needed like say if you wanted like apple or something, you could just go pick an apple off the tree and just enjoy it or whatever. Like they were everywhere. Like the indigenous people took really good care of the land, and then yeah, everything just kind of went to shit and like almost all gone.
The lush Amazon, frequently called the lungs of the earth, has been carefully cultivated by indigenous peoples for millennia. Gatherer hunters knew which areas produced which desirable foods and medicines, and it informed their movements and actions, encouraging certain flora to thrive and reproduce. With just a little bit of effort, they sustain themselves for generations. In one case, a food forest in Morocco has persisted for 2,000 years, providing date palms.
Bro, 2,000 years? That's crazy. Like, could you imagine like maintaining a place where everyone can get food? for 2,000 years. Like that is crazy to me.
Bananas, olives, figs, pomegranates, guava, citrus, and mulberry to the community. Jeff Lawton, the prominent permaculture consultant who wrote about this place, also found a 300-year-old food forest in Vietnam that had been cultivated by the exact same family for 28 generations.
I mean, the Vietnamese are clearly doing something right when it comes to that. Like, I think Vietnam does a lot of things right. Like, even though like they're huge like Ameriboos, like I think that, you know, the Vietnamese is crazy good. Generally, man.
However, when colonizers made landfall during the primary age of colonial
There it
conquest,
is.
they saw wilderness to be exploited, rather than managed systems to care for and leave behind as a legacy for future generations.
Even though, you know, a lot of the indigenous peoples and where they colonized, like, literally showed them how to take care of the land that they were living on for like thousands of years, and then they fucked it up within like 100 years or so. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, they got rid of everything that they've maintained and had built up for thousands of years, and it was gone just like overnight.
So what does a food forest look like? Well, it's not a plot of land with rows of trees, or rows of trees and some plants underneath, or rows of trees with rows of other plants alternating between them. Those are all just types of orchards. A food forest is a multi-layer, virtually self-sustaining, living ecosystem that lets nature do the work. The most popular food forest.
Like, could you imagine going into like a space where, you know, you're able to get like apples, lemons, potatoes, you know, onions and all that, just like growing there, and just like pick up whatever you need. Like, that would be really nice.
Forest model carefully copies a successful natural forest and consists of 7 layers: tall trees, low trees, shrubs, herbs, ground covers, vines, and root crops. Before you even begin putting down the layers though, you need to get together with your community, catalyst group, gardening club, or whatever to choose a location and create a plan. According to startafoodforest.com, once fully established, which takes about 5 years give or take, it can take only 1/30th of an acre, or 1450 square feet of food forest, to sustain one person for a year. See how you can share land with your neighbors, or
Honestly, that's not even bad. Like, for that amount of land for just sustaining one person, that's actually a lot less than I thought it was going to be. Now, just imagine if that was like on a larger scale, and like that everyone would be able to get like the fruits and vegetables that they need. Like, that sounds awesome. It's like the old saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but if you teach a man a fish, he'll eat forever.
appropriate unused land if you don't have enough space. You plant the tall trees or overstory first, keeping the mature size in mind as you space them out. The tall trees build up the soil and provide some shade while letting light through to other plants in the forest. They can be fruit trees, nut trees, or, with some pruning, just sources of wood. After the tall trees have had a bit of time to establish themselves, you can then plant the understory, or low trees. They can be the dwarf versions of the overstory trees, or they can introduce new fruits and nuts entirely. If you don't have much space for a full 7-layer forest garden,
I assume within like the reasoning of as long as it's like native to the land, because otherwise it'll be considered an invasive species and take up like so much of the nutrients that the ecosystem needs in order to survive.
the understory can work as the tallest layer of the forest if you so choose. Next, plant the shrub layer, which may be one of the more populous of the food forest layers. Some shrubs love sunlight, while others love shade, so you can find them all over the garden. Whether hazelnuts, bamboos, roses, or blueberries, this is where preferences can really shine. It's up to the community to determine what you're trying to incorporate, whether food, crafts, ornamentals, birds, insects, native plants, exotics, or just raw biodiversity. Once
Oh, I guess that it doesn't necessarily have to be native. I thought for sure it would have had to be native plants. But I mean, I guess for shrubs and stuff, it doesn't really make that big of a difference compared to like the main trees and stuff.
the overstory, understory, and shrub layers are established, you can move on to the herb layer. Herbs are generally defined as any non-woody vegetation, whether flowers, veggies, or culinary plants like thyme. Herbs like it sunny in most cases, so plant them where there's space and sun to grow. Some herbs are super spreaders like mint, so consider containing them somewhat in raised beds or pots. Meanwhile, other herbs, like cannabis, can just grow straight up. I'd recommend
Hell yeah, my man's telling us to grow cannabis in food gardens. That sounds awesome. The best place to get your cannabis. Hell yeah.
selecting self-seeders and perennials, but if there are some annuals you want to include, that's fine too. Start the herbs in pots though, and give them some time to properly build up before putting
Hell yeah, grow the weed. Just like all the herbs is just cannabis. Oh, that'd be great. You know, you could get high and then you could have something to eat and take it off the tree. That sounds like a great time. It's called the it's called the devil's lettuce for a reason. Oh man, yeah, no. Yeah. Honestly, like having one of these like food gardens sounds great. You know, you could get high and then you could have something to eat too while you're there. Just chillaxing.
them in the ground. Next, you want to plant your ground covers. They provide even more food and habitat.
I didn't realize that this video was going to be like a step-by-step instructions on how to, you know, create these kinds of ecosystems. It's actually kind of great. It's good to know how to this kind of stuff. The only problem is you have to find people, organize people in order to do it, though.
Snuggled between your shrubs and herbs. These ground
Like, I'm all
huggers
for
include
this.
leafy greens like lettuce and sweet treats like strawberries. They protect your food forest from invasive weeds, giving them no space to take root. And speaking of taking root, you can also bring in the last two layers of the food forest, the root layer and vine layer. One goes up and the other goes down into the ground. For the root layer, stick to shallow-rooted crops like sweet potatoes, garlic, and onions. If you don't harvest them all, the rot of roots can add some healthy humus to the soil. For the vines like pumpkin, cucumber, and grapes, sure you can add
Smoke a blunt and grab a banana from the tree, or pull a carrot out of the ground just because you're hungry. I mean, yeah, like that. Doesn't that sound like a great time though? Like, I honestly think that the hippies were onto something. Like at this point, they were fully onto something. Like, you know, have a little bit of fun, and then have something to eat. Like you could like I wouldn't recommend it, but you could probably even eat like some of the pumpkins too. But yeah, like you could essentially have whatever you want, like potatoes or onions and carrots, and like make like a stew, like a vegetable stew or something like that. Or you could just like munch on like fruit, like strawberries or papayas or something like that. Or hell, even just get like pull a cucumber out of the ground and eat like a cucumber. That sounds great.
trellises and fences to guide their growth, but having them up your trees and spread across the forest floor is more legit, at least in my opinion. Be careful about adding too many though, because you don't want them to strangle the other plants. And I mean, that's it. Don't forget paths, of course, and
Hippies are all about enjoying life, and I agree with your lifestyle. I mean, yeah, and like another thing is that the movement in the 60s was also like very anti-war as well. Like I'm sure that a lot of the hippies during like the 60s were at least like some form of left, like, or at least left leaning when it comes to it, because like they were all for, like enjoying life and, not invading other people's land and like taking care of the land that they have and everything. Like hippies are great. Just sad that, they were brutalized and beaten and thrown in jail and having, cannabis made illegal. Like the only reason why cannabis was illegal in the States and even here was because of the movements that hippies have done or have started. And there's like no shot that they weren't all high on pot. Like, let's be real. There's a good chance that they were.
And I mean, maybe you can introduce some chickens, but it's not a requirement. The benefits of food forests, once they've been established, are innumerable. They sequester carbon, cool the climate, provide habitat for wildlife, develop resilience through biodiversity, enrich the soil, provide beauty and tranquility, provide great yields, attract beneficial insects and pollinators, and produce their own mulch, compost.
Like, could you just imagine, like, if we had, like, a shit ton of these food forests everywhere? And then, like, being able to take a stroll down, like, I don't know, like Main Street, for example, and then, like, being able to, like, if you're hungry or something like that, just picking off, like, the fruit or vegetables that you want and, like, either taking it home or, like, eating it, like, right there on the spot. And, like, you wouldn't have to worry about littering because it would just be going back into the ecosystem, so it wouldn't really matter, right? Thought Solarpunk is such a cool concept and aesthetic. Screw Walmart, I'm going to the food forest. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't necessarily need to go to Walmart or like any other big super store chain in order to get the food, like at least like the fruits and vegetables that you need. Like when it comes to like livestock and everything and like meats, to be honest with you, I honestly do think that that small farmers can support like all the needs of everyone on the planet. Like they can easily do it. But, a vast majority of it, the deals that they have to make end up going towards big corporations, and then their livestock is treated mainly and everything. I mean, there are some small farmers that actually do like you'll do that, but like farmers for the most part have been screwed over so much, it's ridiculous. Yeah, like you could go to the food garden or the food forest to get your like your fruits and veggies, and then you can go to your local farmer, pick up your meat and everything, and then man, this is just awesome. I really want Solarpunk now.
And fertilizer, all for very little maintenance and zero damaging herbicides and pesticides, weeding, crop rotation, mowing, or even excessive digging. Be patient, observe your environment, and work well with your community to make cities, suburbs, and country bloom. Solarpunk borrows from anarchic and socialist ideas, including the notion that we should control our own labor. Syndicates and worker cooperatives, while limited under capitalism.
One of the biggest worker co-ops, which inherently good, like worker co-ops and unionization are always going to be good, but the biggest worker co-op that I can think of off the top of my head is Ocean Spray, because which is that cranberry juice company. Like they're a worker co-op, and they actually talk to their employees, and they use more like natural means in harvesting like their cranberries. So like and like for pest controls, like they'll use wolf spiders in order to clear out like all the insects and everything so that they don't have to worry about like making like a super bug. And when it comes time to harvest, they flood the area and go around mushing in the pit and all the cranberries. It's actually really cool the way that they operate. I wish more companies would operate like that.
Some can help facilitate the cooperation of farmers, scientists,
just
and the
the
broader
start, though.
community to develop technologies and techniques that can benefit the whole population instead of just the wealthy few. And here is where I tiptoe into some controversial territory.
Uh-oh, what is he gonna talk? What is he gonna say? What is the controversial stuff he's gonna say?
I think there's a lot of benefit to be enjoyed from GMOs.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. Like, there are, like, everyone loves to hit on GMOs, but, like, GMOs are actually, like, an inherent good. You're able to increase shelf life of food. You're able to get, like, vitamins and minerals and, like, other important things that you can't normally get in certain foods into other foods, like, say like your omega-3s into like corn or something, right? Like it's great. Like everyone loves to hate on them, but like mostly because there's been like a lot of like propaganda around it, as well as like a lot of eco-fascism too. That doesn't help either. But like no, I like GMOs are like completely fine. And like most of the time you don't even know if you're getting like actual like when it comes to the store, at least you don't know if you're getting like GMO food or like not more like organic food. Like most of the time companies will sell like the traditional food and organic food, and all that they'll do is just slap a label on like organic food to increase increase profits. That's all that they'll do for it. Using science, we can become better just by modding your food. I mean, yeah, like you could easily be healthier, but like at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's just a bunch of companies wanting to increase their fucking profit margins, and it's disgusting.
The unaware, GMOs stands for genetically modified organisms. Put simply, they're organisms whose DNA has been modified using genetic engineering technology. While the selective breeding of the past has helped give humanity certain crops with certain desirable traits.
Yeah, and like even like when it comes to like the past, like if you think about like crossbreeding and everything, that's technically GMOs. So I don't understand why so many people are afraid of like the new modern form of crossbreeding and everything. Like all that you're doing is just changing some elements instead of like having the randomness of having to worry about like crossbreeding and everything. You can literally just select the traits that you want instead of having to breed for it and possibly getting lucky, right? So it's crazy. It's crazy to me.
Traits. It takes many generations to see any kind of success.
They're technically, I mean, if you want to look at it that way, technically yes, but like a lot of the fruits and everything that we have, like let's use apples as an example. When it comes to like apples, you want to have the biggest, juiciest, most flavorful apple that you can, right? And so whenever you find a trait that you like, say like the size or the taste or the color or whatever, you would generally tend to crossbreed that in order to get the trait that you want, right? But when it comes to like GMOs, you don't have to worry about that. You can just select those traits that you want, and have everything you want. So you could have like a nice, big, juicy red apple, and like it's perfectly fine. Like, but like I think a lot of people generally tend to think that it causes cancer or autism or some other bullshit. Like it's just ridiculous, man.
Meanwhile, through genetic engineering technology, we've been able to accelerate this process to improve the growth, pest resistance, nutritional content, and ease of farming for many staple crops.
And that's another thing. Like they also provide like a decent amount of pest resistance instead of having to spray like a shit ton of pesticides on it that may or may not work. Like, it's crazy.
However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There has been some
True.
legitimate concern about the impact of GMOs on the environment, as well as some less scientifically grounded concern about the impact of GMOs on human health. The scientific consensus is that GM crops are just as safe for human and animal consumption as conventional food. They don't cause cancer and they don't cause allergies. But it is important to be rigorous in our testing of these crops before introducing them to the wider public.
I 100% agree. I think that a lot of like the propaganda and misleading information against them, as well as, you know, due to that, there haven't been enough like resources like allocated into it. So it's just crazy to me. I like they would 100% should be like they should be looked into, but I ultimately think that GMOs are a good thing.
As for GMO's impact on the environment, a lot of it can be boiled down to the practices of capitalist industrial agriculture. Besides the patents and monopolies that manipulate and foster debilitating dependency on multinational agricultural corporations like Monsanto, the way that GMOs are currently used in monoculture farming contributes to the current decrease in biodiversity and ongoing evolution of resilient pests and diseases that can easily wipe out large populations of flora. We need to liberate the innovations and benefits of GMOs from their current environmentally damaging uses. We need to seize them from the clutches of these corporations and venture into the currently uncharted territory of their immense potential. Our climate is changing, and we need our food sources to change with it to minimize the casualties of collapse. Developing hardy, drought-resistant, and vitamin-dense crops, like the famed golden rice, can go a long.
Yeah, like the golden rice like has had a lot of like criticism against it, but like it literally requires less water than traditional rice does, as well as like they put in, I think it was omega-3s, vitamin C or something. I don't exactly remember what else they had put into it, but it was like very beneficial.
Long way in supporting our communities through crises. And even beyond plants, GMOs can work to reduce the spread of mosquito-borne diseases.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine a world where you don't have to worry about like mosquitoes and like getting like malaria from it just by like, you know, planting a few crops or planting a few things? Like, it's crazy.
I think there are some important ethical considerations to be had about things like genetically modified pigs that grow organs for humans, but still, to take a step into speculative territory, maybe in the near future we can look forward to bamboos as strong as steel, medicines in the forms of fruits and veggies, bioluminescent trees to light our streets, soaps made from leaves and tree sap, mushrooms that can absorb toxic radiation, microorganisms that can quickly break down plastic waste. Shall I go on?
Like I don't know about you, but that just sounds pretty awesome.
What I want to emphasize, though, is the need for community control and accountability throughout the GMO development process. These worker cooperatives need to be transparent and accessible, dispersing knowledge and resources for the benefit of all. GMOs can only be Solarpunk if they work to empower people and the environment, not corporations. To bring things to a close, I've asked our changing climate to present just one more simple Solarpunk solution.
Guerrilla gardening, food forests, and reclaiming GMOs are powerful tools of transformation, but they are just one part of a Solarpunk vision. Solarpunk also imagines what it means to live well inside the home in an environmentally ethical and resilient way. As the climate continues to rage and the forces of capitalism drive us deeper into collapse, extreme heat will only get worse. And the fossil fuel-driven air conditioning we currently use is a false solution to this heat. These machines, which we use to bring cool air indoors, are driving temperatures outdoors even higher. Solarpunk?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, the the AC units that we actually have and use, like, they produce like so much like house emission. It's crazy. Like, granted, it's nowhere near as bad as like the fossil fuel industry. Like, it's just fucking awful. But yeah, no, like, it is another big problem. I do think needs to be resolved, but I don't think it's like, I don't think it's too big that we need to solve it right now. I think we should be tackling the biggest problems right now, being like transportation, like a whole bunch of the fucking mining industry. There's so much like that shit that happens, and like, you know, not subsidizing the fossil fuel industries.
Once again, could offer a solution: Terracotta Air Conditioning. A beautiful solution that combines the biomimicry of beehives with the cooling properties of wet terracotta. Terracotta cooling systems have already been tried and tested by a team of scientists in New Delhi, and work through a very simple mechanism. First, pipes pour water on top of a structure of hundreds of tubes, completely soaking them. And as air flows through this wet terracotta, it cools significantly. This process is similar to how your body cools you down with sweat droplets. And finally, as the water makes its way to the bottom of the structure, it's collected in a basin and recycled up to the top to complete a closed-loop system. When working properly, the structure can cool air by as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius. The team of New Delhi scientists have even automated the process to provide optimal water flow so it doesn't require any work. But if creating an automatic water release system at the top is too complex, you can simply pour water onto the terracotta structure every so often. The promise of this
That actually sounds pretty cool. Like, honestly, that sounds awesome.
system lies in the terracotta's simplicity and beauty. It can be built and implemented quickly as long as you have a bit of water and some friends or community to help make terracotta cylinders. Cylinders that aren't beholden to any chemical coolants or fossil fuels, yet are extremely effective. In this way, the terracotta air conditioner reflects the core of a Solarpunk vision. It combines the aesthetics of a naturally made beehive with the DIY attitudes of punk. It uses technology in a way that expands access to a comfortable life and brings the workings of the natural world in harmony with the human one. In short, it builds resilience to the climate crisis in a decentralized, accessible, and beautiful way.
Thanks for the help. All in all, whether through guerrilla gardening, food forest commons, GMO co-ops, or terracotta climate control, we can be empowered by Solarpunk to take action in our communities to build resilience in the face of climate crisis. Through a positive synergy of power to the people, lessons from Mother Nature, and our technological potential, we can build a better world here and now. I hope you'll join me on the ground. Peace. Check out our changing climate.
Yeah, no, Solarpunk is awesome. I want it now. We should getting it. Oh, just literally just watched this. Oh, it's the same video. Well, in that case, let's move towards a video on lawns and why they are very, very bad for
Bonus content
us.
replaces this ad because there are no ads on Nebula. And you'll not only see a lot of extended editions, exclusive content, and ad-free videos over on Nebula from
So we're gonna be going over why. Oh, we're gonna be going over why the lawn needs to die, because it 100% does need to die. So yeah, let's watch.
In 2015, 75-year-old Gary Suttle was sitting on her porch watching the leaves rustle in the trees when a cop rolled up and handed her an arrest warrant. The reason for her arrest?
Okay, what do you guys think that her reasoning for her arrest is going to be? There's a reason why she was arrested. Probably imagined by the title of the video, but see if anyone can get She was arrested for not maintaining the lawn.
She had failed to mow her lawn. That's right, the cops and Suttle's neighbors deemed it necessary to hold the threat of arrest over the septuagenarian because the turf
I mean, of course it was in Texas, though. Like, of course it was in Texas.
grass occupying the space in front of her house was left unchecked. How did we in the United States come to this? Why is the lawn such a sacred space in white suburban America? This is the story of the American lawn, how it came to be, the complex underpinnings of its green blades, and how we might work to rid ourselves from its cultural grasp. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream, which now comes with
I say just let it die. It just kills biodiversity, and it's not good. Just let it die.
Nebula for free when you sign up using the link in the description. In the 17th and 18th century, landholding European aristocrats were getting jealous. They saw beautiful fields of grass and perfectly trimmed patches of green in the paintings of their favorite artists and wanted all of it for themselves. So they began to terraform their world. With the enclosure of common land, aristocrats gained prime property for lawns and forced lower-class peasants into wage labor jobs like groundskeepers and gardeners. From France to Italy to England, the wealthy ruling class.
I mean, that still technically does exist, though. Like, especially, like, with more, like, predominant, like, people who actually want, like, their places to look like this. It's fucking...
Embraced the luxuries of turf grass and used it as a foundational element in landscaping design for their manors. And what could be more a display of capitalist power, of leisure, and of wealth than a field of green that had to be closely watched and tended by former peasants forced into wage labor through land enclosures?
A lawn was a way for these English elites to show off they were so wealthy that they didn't need this land to grow food.
That's in the podcast 99% Invisible. He goes on to add that the English ruling class used lawns to show that
they could afford to let their fields go fallow.
And could afford to keep grazing animals and scythe-wielding peasants to keep it short.
So the lawn began as a display of wealth for the white European aristocracy, but then was quickly exported to the colonial project that is the United States. Both Thomas
It happened here, too, in Canada.
Jefferson and George Washington enjoyed wide manicured lawns kept perfectly trimmed by the forced labor of enslaved people. But it wasn't until the 1870s, when the push lawnmower, the sprinkler, and the suburbs all sprouted into the American lifestyle, that the lawn became a reality among those outside the ruling class. Having already been established as a symbol of luxury and leisure, the lawn was adopted in the outskirts of cities and soon turned into a symbol of conformity. Through advertisement after advertisement and eventually neighborhood codes and laws, a patch of grass in front of your house became a staple in the image of the American dream. But in the 100 years following the Civil War, the lawn was only slowly taking up space. After World War II, however, the adoption of the American lawn exploded. Soldiers came home from war, suburban sprawl accelerated at an astronomical pace, and the chemicals used in the trenches now found their way onto plants and insects.
Yeah, can you imagine, you know, the chemicals that we use to kill other people are now being used on our lawns? Like, that's just ridiculous to me.
With the suburban boom came the boom in lawn culture. We even see this in the deluge of lawn ads in magazines around that time period. With thousands of Americans now proud owners of lawns, chemicals of war rebranded themselves into pesticides and herbicides to keep the grass green. And by the 1960s, this chemical warfare got so bad that Rachel Carson noticed the death of birds all around her, prompting her to write Silent Spring. But those that predominantly benefited from the generous post-World War II government programs like the GI Bill and guaranteed home loans that fueled the adoption of the lawn were white. In short, the suburban lawn was very much a white American reality. In fact, throughout its transformation and expansion, the monoculture suburban lawn worked in tandem with
Ah, yes, I love using mustard gas for my food and enemies. True. Like, it's just crazy to me, though. Like, they rebranded chemicals that we used in fucking war into, like, herbicides and pesticides. Like, it's crazy to me that, like, that happens.
With its owners to crowd out any plant, animal, or human that didn't fit within their definition of beauty, conformity, or civilization.
When it comes to the human aspect of it, he means black. Like, because like the suburbs are very, very white, it's very uncommon to see like anyone of color in the suburbs, and when they are, they're not viewed as like trustworthy, some shit, unless they go far and beyond what they expect them to do.
The lawn quite literally allowed rich white American colonists and then middle-class suburban whites to physically enact colonization of the land. While indigenous genocide raged, cows brought from Europe ravenously ate the native varieties of grasses. But colonists quickly realized their cattle was unsuitable for the American terrain.
Yeah, like there used to be like so much different types of grass here, and like types of grass did we? Let's see here. Where are I was not expecting to learn so much about grass today, but this is genuinely. I mean, yeah, like I know of two in like the prairie provinces. Like you have your more traditional grass that you use for your like your lawn and everything that was brought over for like this specific reason, being the lawns. And then there's also something called snake grass as well, which is it's more like the blades are more thicker and have stripes on them. But I'm just I know it used to be about yeah, that's another one. There's the tiger eye grass too. Fine. Let's go through it together. Um okay, so here is some. There's the northern wheatgrass, western porcupine grass, blue thread, blue gamma, western wheat, club moss. Like I imagine like there was a shit ton more of different species of grass that North America has had, but I imagine like it has to be like at least half of woods. Yeah, no, well, it's definitely more than I thought that there was still, but like it pales in comparison to how much different types of native grass that there was. Anyways, let's get back to the lawn and how it ruins everything.
Just couldn't get enough nutrients from native grasses. So the colonists brought Europe to the Americas and planted the seeds of European grasses, which sprouted out of the ground and pushed out native prairie, plants, and animals.
And yeah, this is that's another reason for like why like so much of the grass that we typically think of like on our lawns and shit, like all of it is European. Like all of it's European. Like a vast majority of like the native grasses that have aren't generally to be like more like native to the land, which is kind of sad, to be honest.
In short, the origins of American turfgrass are rooted in the colonial terraforming of indigenous land, an act which, in a small way, legitimized the wholesale theft of land in the minds of white Europeans because it now looked much more like the European countryside they were used to. Much in the same way the United States massacred buffalo, a staple food source highly important to indigenous plains nations, as well as forced the assimilation of thousands of indigenous children at violent boarding schools that quite
Yeah. On Truth and Reconciliation Day, we're definitely going to be going into the boarding schools and the whole residential school systems. How fucking horrific and horrible it was. Like we will be going like headfirst into that. I'm not too sure when I'm going to start streaming. It'll probably be like a lot earlier, considering that's like a national holiday, so definitely will be going into that. Not only did the Europeans take our also took our grass. Hell yeah. No, they didn't take our grass. They defiled it and now it's all gone pretty much. Outside of like some instances where like a lot of the European grass can't live because it's like either too sandy or it's like there's too much clay and whatnot. Like it's mostly like a prairie. It's mostly like in the prairies, but like it has expanded elsewhere as well.
quite literally tried to beat any cultural or linguistic heritage out of them. So too.
Yeah, no, the residential school was complete. Didn't know it. But we definitely will be talking more about that at a later date, because I have some opinions on that, considering my heritage. So
Did they use European grass varieties like Kentucky bluegrass to transform their landscape into one that fit their white European vision of the world? But the lawn is not only wielded as a tool of cultural destruction, it is also fueling multiple environmental crises. Now, in the midst of droughts and the climate crisis, turfgrass lawns are starting to look a lot less appealing.
yeah, like look how gross this is. Like, doesn't that look nasty? Yes, I'm really glad that we got rid of all of the native grass and replaced it with turf grass to make it and make it look really appealing. Like it looks. What are you talking about? These neighborhoods look great to live in. Like I love these. I love the lawns. Their lawns look nice, right?
To own, let alone spend time to manicure. In the United States, the emissions from lawn maintenance equipment like gas-powered mowers account for 4% of the
That's actually a lot more than I thought it would be. Like 4% for just like lawnmowers is kind of crazy though.
country's total annual carbon emissions.
It looks beautiful. Oh yes, it's great. It looks gorgeous. I love being able to play in the dirt.
This number is so large because turf grass is the largest crop by area in the United States. Lawns occupy 40 million acres of land in the United States.
Holy, 40 million acres of turf grass in the US alone? That's crazy. How much turf grass occupies Canada's? Let's see. Um, I can't do that here. If how to get your yard off of grass? Yeah, no, like it's actually kind of crazy though. Like turf grasses generally tend to be it generally tends to be golf courses, sports fields, residential and commercial lawns, sod farms, and other municipal parks, cemeteries. That's actually crazy how much turf grass is actually man. And like some of these areas like golf courses and like residential and commercial lawns are just crazy. And same thing with like municipal parks, cemeteries, and like roadsides. Like it's ridiculous on how much it's used. Wait, why the want to protect grass? It's killing biodiversity. Bro, they're literally giving you step-by-step instructions on how to maintain the destructive nature of turf grass. Oh, like it gets rid of like other stuff. The roadside with the turf grass, even though there's no reason for it. I mean, yeah, like there's literally no reason for it. Like I don't understand whether it has to be turf grass at like side of the road. Like I'm sorry, I don't care. Required potential bans. Like, that's just crazy. Like just this alone, like just these alone, like surprises me a lot. Like why the hell does airport need to have turf grass? Like it doesn't matter. You're not gonna see it anyways, right? So what difference does it make if it's turf grass or if it's not? Like cemeteries, I kind of get because you know like some grass are like is very sharp and like same thing with like parks I kind of get as well, but like airports and roadsides I don't get at all, and like I completely disagree with like the residential and commercial lawns like the turf grass like there's no reason for it. And like when it comes to like golf and field or for the sports fields, like I just don't see a reason for it either. Education facilities. Bro, like it's fucking everywhere. The heck? That's crazy. That is ridiculous, man. Honestly, I say we should just get rid of it.
States, which is roughly 3 times the area of America's second biggest crop, corn. And all this grass requires a massive amount of water.
Yeah, like it's not like people could be drinking this water or anything. Instead, they're feeding it to their grass sets, that looks great.
As well. Every single day, US lawn owners collectively pour 9 billion gallons of fresh water onto their lawns.
Holy fuck. Why is that so high? 9 billion gallons? How much is that? How much is 9 billion gallons? Put in commas 'cause it's such a big number. uh yeah, that's a lot of water. 43 or 34 is it 34 billion gallons of water? That's crazy. Like 34 liters, like that's way too much water to be ridiculous.
To keep them green. A lot of this water often hits sidewalks or roads, rarely.
Humans will waste water on turf grass, but not spare a drop to another human desperately needs it. I mean, true. That is literally true. Like, fuck, we take better care of our lawns than fucking other people. It's ridiculous to me.
Making it into the roots of the plants and often running off into local waterways, carrying all the chemicals that American lawn owners use on their grass. According to the EPA, lawn owners douse their lawns with 78 million pounds of pesticides and 90 million pounds of fertilizer.
That's crazy to me. Like, honestly, the fertilizer I sort of get, but like the pesticides, like that's crazy. Like, why is that so high?
Every single year. Traces of these chemicals are not only ending up in waterways and our drinking water, but they're shredding animal and insect populations like the monarch butterfly. And these chemicals are not only harmful to plants and insects.
Bro, you're endangering the monarch, the monarch butterfly. I can't get behind it anymore. It's such a beautiful insect. And they're getting rid of it, or like they're threatening it because they're using too many fucking pesticides, like and fertilizer. It's just
lawn care equipment like Roundup has been linked to cancer in a number of its human users. We are quite literally ravaging the planet and ourselves to maintain a little patch of green in front of our houses. And in some cases,
honestly, I say at this point we just get rid of it. Like, I don't care. Like, just get rid of it. The lawn needs to go. Like, if it's destroying like us and, you know, the fucking planet. It just needs to go. It just needs to go.
Cases like Gary Suttle, it's forced on us by cops and the state. The lawn, with its history of class, race, and colonial oppression, combined with its penchant for ecological destruction, must die. But to do that, we have to provide real alternatives that not only replace the grass below our feet.
I mean, we just watched like a shit ton of Solarpunk stuff, and we should 100% be, you know, replacing it with like food forests or like some other shit like that. Like that would be so much better than just like the dinky little green fucking grass that you pick out when you're bored. Like honestly, that sounds a lot better. I don't know about you, but it sounds a lot better to me.
But also repair the harm caused by American capitalist conquest. Understanding that lawns are intimately linked with visions of class, settler colonialism, and capitalist ecological destruction is essential for developing effective and lasting alternatives. If you own a lawn, the simplest thing you can do is just to stop taking care of it. But I think that approach should be seen as a last resort.
Forest would make better use of that water. I mean, absolutely. But like in the video that we watched earlier, we, you know, we still do need to take care of them as well. Like if they need water, we still give them water, but for the most part, like they're fairly independent. Because, you know, they're biodiverse, and like in biodiversity is an inherent good thing, because, you know, you're gonna have like different forms of fauna and trees and stuff, as well as, you know, like no competition for like nutrients or water, because they'll take what they need, right?
In order to repair the harm caused by centuries of lawn colonization, we need to develop.
But what I was gonna say beforehand, before we got sidetracked, is if we actually don't like cut our lawns and everything, like we'll be like the cops will be calling on us for like not maintaining our lawn, and we'll get like a fine or like arrested or some bullshit like that. It's crazy to me. Just like what happened to the lady of beginning of the video.
Active alternatives. Think about what we could do with that 40 million acres of space if we rid ourselves of turf grass. Front yard gardens with food available to all who want it, native perennials and gardens that actually synthesize with the landscape, and xeriscaping in dry climates that don't require any water to maintain. These endeavors are already happening, with thousands of backyard farms replacing lawns across the country. A recent Southern California.
I mean, like, how many people actually go out onto their lawn and like actually sit on it? Like, no one does, right? And like converting it into like either like a garden or some other shit like that, or like a food forest, like a small mini food forest that you can just pick it from. Like that sounds way better than the fucking dog shit lawnscape, as I'm gonna call it, that we have now. It's like just fucking awful. Kills biodiversity. It's apparently rooted in class, and it's so fucking stupid.
Incentive paying residents to rip up their lawn, or someone like Taylor Keene, one of the Omaha peoples who's been developing and growing indigenous seed varieties in his lush backyard garden. These are the actions we need to take, because to start the process of decolonization and thriving in a zero carbon world, the lawn must die. If you're watching this video wondering whether there are more people getting arrested for not mowing their lawns,
100%. There are 100% more people getting arrested for their lawns for not like mowing. And it's like the stupidest shit too. Like, honestly, who cares? No one does. Like, it's just shit. Anyways, let's watch the video on ecofascism and how big of a problem it actually is in The in climate change.
This video was made possible by the people who support me on Patreon. Get early access to all my videos by becoming an OCC Patreon supporter. On January 6th, 2021, at the behest of
Oh yes, I actually remember watching this. Like, I remember because I was like so fucking bored and everything. I was watching Hassan stream when this was happening, and I had no fucking clue what was going on. It was fucking crazy. Such a dumb moment in history, man.
Donald Trump, insurrectionists stormed the United States Capitol building. Spearheading the charge was this man,
For 4 years, we have
referred to as
I don't remember if we watched it or not, but we actually watched an interview with Andrew from Channel 5, and this guy. It was actually pretty wild.
the QAnon shaman. Images and theories about this man blanketed the
granted,
internet
it was like
in the
most
days
Nazi
following
shit,
the
but
attempted
still.
coup. Conservatives and Republicans painted him as some kind of paid actor, hippie, climate activist. But
Very dumb moment in history. I mean, yeah, and like the funny thing is that essentially the same kind of people tried to commit the same shit in February here. Like it was so dumb. And then remember we made fun of them. Like it was. Oh, they were. It's just so stupid.
these theories were obscuring the truth of who the QAnon shaman really is. A truth that reveals the dark history of environmentalism and a terrifying strain of white supremacist thought that is now growing in far-right circles. This is the story of eco-fascism. In the early 1900s, conservation was taking hold of the American imagination. The forefathers of the early environmental movement, like John Muir, Gifford Pinchot, and Teddy Roosevelt, were carving out wild spaces in the United States for the enjoyment of all Americans. They established the first wilderness area in Yosemite National Park and worked to create policies protecting wild animals.
Weren't they like super fucking racist to the native people that were there? I remember hearing somewhere that they were like very fucking racist towards the native people.
Animals. At least, that's how I learned it in school. These men, however, were far from the defenders of life we paint them out to be. In fact, they were pretty much the opposite. John Muir wrote blatantly about his perceptions of the indigenous people of the California's Merced Valley as subhuman, lazy, dirty, and superstitious. And then, in the same breath, praised the wildlife of Yosemite as divine.
Bro, we hear the exact same thing in fucking Canadian schools too. It's ridiculous, man. Oh fuck. North America is the dumbest continent.
Indeed, the very creation and preservation of Muir's Yosemite National Park meant the forced expulsion of Native American communities from the area. But among his contemporaries in the environmental movement, John Muir was sadly the tamest. The head of Theodore Roosevelt's National Conservation Committee, Gifford Pinchot, who many know as the father of conservation, was also a staunch eugenicist. Or in other words, he believed that white people...
Come on, bro. Why the fuck are all like old people like super racist and fucking pro eugenics? It's so fucking
had superior genetic traits, and that in order to preserve this genetic superiority, the world needed to forcibly sterilize or kill people of color. And Pinchot wasn't just a closet eugenicist either. This man was a delegate of the first and second
because that was normal then. I mean, that doesn't mean that it's okay though. Like that's super fucking bad.
International Eugenics Congress, and also a member of the Advisory Council of the American Eugenics Society for 10 years. And then there's Madison Grant. A personal friend of then-President Theodore Roosevelt, Grant actively worked to establish wilderness preservation in the form of Denali National Park, lobbied the New York government to restrict hunting practices, fought the construction of the Hetch.
I mean, yeah, that's why I'm very against the current invasion in Ukraine. Like, due to my stances, people think that I'm like pro-Russia. I'm like, bro, just because of where I stand politically, that does not mean I'm fucking pro-Russia. Russia is doing so much fucking bad. Killing so many people.
Ketchy Dam in Yosemite, and also established the Bronx Zoo. And while he was engaging in these environmental pursuits,
I was actually at the Bronx Zoo, and I honestly kind of enjoyed it. You know, I didn't really like going to them as a kid, but now I kind of like going to them because, you know, you can like buy alcohol at the zoo, and I imagine here in Canada you can probably like it's super fucking high and go to the zoo. Well, like I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. But yeah, no, going to the zoo. Great. I enjoyed like some of the I enjoyed the stuff at the Bronx Zoo. It was fairly interesting. I got a T-shirt from them. See if I can find it. I can show it. Yeah, I mostly got it for the design, but it actually looks. I only got it because it looked nice. Because something is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Grant was espousing white supremacist and eugenicist views in his notorious 1916 book, The Passing of the Great Race, which Theodore Roosevelt called a capital book. The tome outlined the superiority of the quote-unquote Nordic race and lamented its supposed decline. Grant
Why do fucking white supremacists always point towards like the Nordic race and like Nordic heritage? I'm like, the Norwegians, like a vast majority of the Norwegians don't support like their their own fucking racist ass colonial ass history. It's crazy. So stupid.
was such a white supremacist that Adolf Hitler wrote him a personal letter to tell Grant that his book was his personal Bible. So,
I mean, yeah, like America did do like a lot of horrible shit that, you know, Hitler did enjoy, like fucking like obviously this shit, and then as well as like fucking like slavery and shit, like on how they treated the Africans. Like a vast majority of that stuff is well, I mean, yeah, it was pretty cool. Like most of the other stuff was just like a bunch of puns that I didn't really care about. Like they had like four Beatles on a shirt, and it was like the Beatles and whatever. I'm like, eh.
as environmentalism took shape in the early 20th century, some of its most prominent and powerful advocates were deeply rooted in white supremacist thought, a tradition that continued into the 1960s and 70s.
Oh, here we go. This is gonna be such a great conversation. I think I'm probably gonna make this the last video of stream. This definitely is a Nazi dog whistle right here.
With the publishing of Paul and Anne Ehrlich's Population Bomb in 1968, the United States exploded into a frenzy of fears about overpopulation.
Which, for context, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was written by a fucking Nazi. Like that book. Essentially what it means, like the Nazi conspiracy theory of overpopulation, which isn't even true, by the way. Like, we're nowhere near the carrying capacity of Earth. We have, if I'm not mistaken, I think, like, if things were to maintain as they are now, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it's like 30, or no, not 30, I think 3 billion people. But if we go, like, beyond that and, like, actually do Solarpunk and egalitarianism, probably achieve way much more than that. But it ultimately doesn't matter because populations, like, our population is like, world population, I should say, is averaging out about like 10 billion. So we're nowhere even close. It's mostly just like a Nazi thing in order to, say that, the white fucking race is being like bred off the map or whatever the fuck. It's so stupid.
The thesis of the book was that societal and environmental collapse were at our doorstep, and overpopulation was the driver.
Sometime in the next 15 years, the end will come.
The first page of the book describes a stinking hot night in Delhi wherein people were closely packed together, thrusting their hands through taxi windows, begging, and others were defecating and urinating. But what
I mean, that's what he saw though was just like the horrible parts of capitalism that like a lot of people like him don't see. Like that's just the capitalist structure, which is why a lot of like socialists or communists or other leftists in general will say we're always going to have population is just excuse to kill people. I mean 100%. Plus it's also like a Nazi dog whistle. But yeah, no, what he was seeing was the inherent systems of capitalism is why they believe it anyway. I mean, to a certain point, like there is also like a racial component too, because they think there's something called the what was it called? Like the one clause rule where like you're not considered like pure blood white unless, you have a specific amount of whiteness in your blood, which whatever the fuck that means. Like whiteness as a concept is just ridiculous. Like it's only there to, fucking endorse racism and like maintain the positions of power that a bunch of like white supremacist fascists have. It's so fucking
what Ehrlich was seeing,
and like as a concept, like it's completely made up. Like it does not exist. And like it came out of a reaction to blackness and like black pride because in the slavery days, a lot of the people who were brought over from like Africa or wherever, they had no idea what their languages, what the roots were, whatever, because all that was stripped away from them and either beaten out of them or they weren't even born to know what know what their heritage is. So they came up with a more or less universal culture, being black culture, and that's how that came to be. It's because of neocolonialism and slavery, which still does happen, by the way. It's just now that's just they paint them as criminals and that, but that's why it's that's why like the whole like fucking white culture thing is just completely shit, like white pride and everything. Like it's just a way to maintain power and maintain racism. That's all it is. I mean, we see this shit all the time, like in the BLM movements, for example. Like we had like the White Lives Matter protests and the fucking All Lives Matter protests, which which is just fucking fascist and aesthetics overall. Because like all that they care about is just like the aesthetics and everything. They don't really care about like all lives. If they actually did, they would have got fucking like vaccinated, whatever the fuck. Like a lot of those people aren't pro life. They generally want to like fucking murder like a lot of the BLM and Antifa guys. It's so stupid. And I love it because like I hear it all the time where like, oh, the BLM protests were fucking violent and everything. I'm like, yeah, that's only because fucking white supremacist agitators and fucking cops showed up and like the shit out of the protesters, so of course it was going to turn violent. Like, only having the cops there makes things get more violent and everything. It's so fucking ridiculous.
Was not
Anyways, let's get back to it.
overpopulation. What he was seeing was gross inequality in a capitalist system. To be quite clear, overpopulation is not the problem. Various studies have shown that the conspicuous consumption of just 10%
Yeah, it's
of the world's
it's ridiculous. Like 10% of people own pretty much everything and contribute the most to climate change, to wealth inequality, to everything that we see in like in the capitalist system. Like, it's ridiculous. And like a bunch of that, like, you have like a bunch of like propaganda and everything saying like the poorest 50% of the people are causing all the problems that we have, so they should be like executed, or fucking other dog shit reasonings like that, when it's not coming from the bottom, it's coming from the top. Like, they cause the most amount of problems that we have.
population is responsible for 49% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Yet overpopulation quickly took hold as a serious issue, and often the solution mirrored the solutions of Grant, Muir, and Pinchot.
Yep.
Decrease the population of non-white poor people to
What did I say? It was 100% roots in order to, do like Nazi shit.
save wealthy white nations. Indeed, Ehrlich often encouraged sterilization, and American ecologist Garrett Harding outlines this exact argument in his 1974 paper, Lifeboat Ethics. Harding, with prose baked in white supremacy, envisions nations as lifeboats on a planet of dwindling resources. According to Harding, in this scenario, it's morally excusable for rich lifeboats to let those struggling in the water drown.
I mean, that should not be the case. We should 100% be helping the struggling in the water. We should be helping them out, not having to have as many people die. See fit. It's so stupid.
And Harding's views weren't just fringe theories. The 1950s, 60s, and 70s witnessed a slew of forced sterilizations in the majority world.
And like, granted, yes, there was like revolutions in like the 60s and hippies and MLK and stuff like that. But like, ultimately, none of it mattered because they were still doing fucking genocide in like Puerto Rico and Morocco, or even like Chile. Like, it's so fucking disgusting. And like, they tried to pull the exact same shit in like Vietnam, but I guess Vietnam was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, if people actually knew what the hell went on in like the Middle East and in South America, like people in North America sort of understand what went on in the Middle East, but like, they have no clue like the history that went on in like fucking Bolivia or like Chile or fuck, even though it's like kind of a meme at this point, or even like Venezuela. A lot of it has to do with like colonialism and like propping up like fucking fascist dictators and like attempting coups and whatnot, like to get rid of like the elected socialist leaders. Like, it's so fucking crazy, man. We'll have to do a stream on it. Like, there's just so much to talk about when it comes to that.
From the sterilization of 1/3 of the women in Puerto Rico to India's mass sterilization program in 1975 that withheld welfare and government benefits to lower caste people who refused sterilization, fear of overpopulation led to sterilization programs often propped up by the United States. And within the United States, the fear of quote-unquote hyperfertility of women of color and concerns about resource depletion meant that from
That's not what I wanted to do.
up by the United States. And within the United States, the fear of quote-unquote hyperfertility of women of color and concerns about resource depletion meant that from 1970 to 1976, the Indian Health Services sterilized 25 to 42% of indigenous women seeking healthcare. While in North Carolina in the 1960s, 65% of women who were sterilized in the state were black, despite making up only 25% of the population. The point here is this. Although environmentalists sounding the alarm about overpopulation might seem harmless, it is more often than not used as an excuse for eugenics and racist.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's ridiculous, man.
Policies. These different strands of white supremacist environmentalism are once again getting pulled from the past and coalescing before our very eyes. In fact, this ideology stormed the halls of Congress during the January 6th insurrection in the form of the QAnon shaman, who, according to a deep dive of his social media page, manifests his eco-fascist worldview through only eating organic food while simultaneously lionizing Nordic culture and Viking paraphernalia. If this sounds familiar,
Yeah, a lot of his tattoos are like Nazi shit. Like, it's actually kind of crazy.
It's because eco-fascists and white supremacists love Madison Grant, the guy who wrote about the decline of the Nordic race. And I'm not just saying this. Anders Breivik, the Norwegian who killed 69 teenagers and 8 adults in a brutal 2011 mass shooting and bombing, quoted Madison Grant's Nordic theory multiple times in his lengthy manifesto. The person responsible for the Christchurch massacre at 2 mosques, a self-described eco-fascist himself, wrote that immigration is environmental warfare and that there is no nationalism without environmentalism. While the El Paso shooter argued that if we can get rid of enough people, then our way of...
Honestly, bro, like, America should have some form of gun control. Like, that's just way too many fucking shootings in, like, a couple of years. Like, I'm sorry if you write a manifesto, like, that's just an automatic red flag. Like, that guy should not have a gun. like these mass shooters and mass murderers literally fucking wrote manifestos, and it's such a big red flag. Like, as soon as you write a manifesto, that's game over. Karl Marx, really big red flag guy, literally.
life can be more sustainable. And decades before these shootings, the infamous Unabomber espoused similar views in his 35,000-word manifesto that argued that industrialization and population were ruining the world. But this extremist thought is also prevalent in the mass media. Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson has spoken multiple times about how a rise in immigration is causing local environmental degradation.
Huge fire breaks out in the Sierras last summer.
Come on, dude. How is this even news? How is this even news? American news is just wild.
Started inadvertently by an illegal immigrant, and they say literally nothing because their concern for open borders overrides their concern for the environment.
Modern eco-fascism.
I mean, like, open borders isn't a fucking problem, though. Why are we subjugating people to being born on a different side of an imaginary line? It's so stupid, man. Like, borders, the only reason, like, borders exist is maintain, like, fucking violence. That's the only reason why they exist.
Is not anything new. Through lines of white supremacy and racial genocide run throughout the environmental movement's history. Today, as in the past, it's an extremely dangerous trend in the far right. Its ideological subscribers are not using environmentalism to mask their white nationalist and eugenicist ideals. The two inform each other simultaneously, often with the conclusion being that the only way to stop climate change is through brutal violence and draconian eugenics regimes.
And it's a constant circle, like, keep going over and over, like, trying to justify the view. Oh, it has to be this way, or we have to be violent in order to kill, because, you know, we're overpopulated. And, like, the reason why, like, a fascist society won't work out is because it's inherently going to collapse. Because let's use the American society as an example. even though, you know, there are like rights for like, say, like black people, gay people, LGBTQ people in general, or whatever. As soon as you start off by removing one, let's use, I think the most recent one was LGBT. As soon as you get rid of the rights for those people, and you know, push them back into hiding or whatever the fuck, then it's gonna be the black people, then it's gonna be women, then it's gonna be, I don't know, the Italians, then whoever else that they say is not part of the in group. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, that's why fascism ultimately will cannibalize itself. Like, it's so crazy that people actually believe in this shit. I used to believe in this shit. I don't anymore. But yes, there was a time where I actually did believe in this shit, man. It's it was really big wake call when I was saying shit like this.
Regimes. As climate change gets worse and worse and our global prospects more dire, eco-fascist extremist thought seems to be growing in prevalence among the right. This means that there's a growing battle over what the climate crisis will mean. As Naomi Klein puts it,
are we in the wealthy world going to hoard what is left, lock out everybody else, see this resurgence in these abhorrent ideologies that never went away, or...
The short answer is yes. If it keeps trending the way that it is, the answer will 100% be yes. They will 100% be locked out of the out of everything. Like, we won't allow them in. There will be trying to exile the ones that or the people that already live here, regardless of how long they've been here. Like, it's just ridiculous, man.
Or are we going to recognize that our fates are interconnected?
Our only choice to fight these fascist ideologies is to address climate change in a way that will not only repair the harm of past racist environmental measures, but also re-envision a more equitable and just world. That means seeing the problems of overpopulation for what they really are.
Yeah, like, this is just failed capitalism. Like, that's all it is. Like, the whole, like, conspiracy theories behind overpopulation is literally just due to failed capitalism. That's all it is.
Failed capital.
Killing people leads to more people killing other people. I mean, yeah, it's literally true. But, like, it's just ridiculous, man.
Capitalism and deep-seated racism. Unfortunately, videos like these, while very important, do terribly with the YouTube algorithm, and sponsors don't want to touch them. But
yeah, no, like, he is, like, completely right about that. Like, a lot, like, he was correct about, like, a lot of things. So, like, I kind of wish he would have touched on some more, or some other stuff in it. But yeah, no, like, it's just completely made up. Like, we have more than enough room for people. Like, another thing that, like, fucking Nazis like to say is, oh, we won't have enough food to feed everyone, or we won't have enough water to give everyone. I'm like, oh, that's not even true. Like, over a third of food produced is thrown out, and like, what, like 70% of the world is water. Literally just invest money into, you know, research and development of machines that can filter out, like, seawater. It's not hard. And, like, the food problem, like, that's honestly not a problem. Like, we don't have a problem with production of food. We have a problem with distribution of food, as well as throwing out food. In more developed nations, we throw out a lot of fucking food. Even though, you know, we have brothers and sisters in our countries, you know, literally fucking dying of starvation like small children dying of starvation. Like it's just disgusting, man. I don't understand how anyone can believe shit. It's ridiculous. Anyways, I think I'm probably gonna wrap up stream for today. It was really fun going down a rabbit hole of environmental stuff and Solarpunk, y'all. It's a lot of fun. We'll see what happens next week. If anything noteworthy happens next week, probably talk about that. Like I probably could have talked about like the Johnny Depp like case and court case and shit, but honestly, I'm not really too interested in that. Solarpunk is cool. Anyways, well, hope to see everyone later. See ya.